From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Spacebrains, the show where we joy-watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, tonight it's episode 55, and we're talking about the classic film Metropolis.
Should we be talking about it since it's a silent film? Maybe we should just have show cards.
Okay, podcast done.
Imagine...
See you next time.
Intertitle.
Intertitle.
Go for it. Metropolis, 1927.
It was 1927. So in tonight's episode, we will reveal what we thought about the film, the ins and outs of narrative and film language, plus a really deep dive, and I'm looking into this, of the specific part of science. I'm hoping it's robots, and that the filmmakers are proposing. This was directed by, and look, I've got to say, I've got a bit of a director's crush on Fritz Lang. I love him. I did a big piece about him when I was at film school, and I just freaking love this man. Oh, I love his films. Maybe that's what I should say. I don't know if I really love the man because I don't know enough about him.
He's a bit old and crusty now.
He's probably old and crusty and
long gone.
Long gone. Yeah, many, many moons ago. I was going to say something else that would probably turn people off. It was written by him and his wife at the time, which you're the German here. What is that name?
Thea von Harbou.
There you go. I knew I was going to say it wrong, so there we go. So people should turn back, right, Surrey?
Turn back now is a spoiler warning, but let's face it, it's a 100-year-old film. If you haven't seen this movie, you're probably never going to see it, so you should just listen to us anyway. But go back and watch it. You'll be surprised. This is your spoiler warning. We're going to tell you all of the plot secrets.
There's a machine man woman, which is very confusing, but they call her machine man, but it's obviously a woman.
Well, that's a translational issue. Mention is it man in the same term we might say mankind.
Well, you're the German here. You tell me.
So yes, like the machine man in this case is just a machine person.
Machine person.
Just the word for person and male is interchangeable in this instance.
I do wonder that a little bit. Like, is it like the Western point of view on that kind of concept a little bit, you know? But anyway, we will diverge. So warning. Turn back, watch the 1,800 different versions of Metropolis. If you have the time and you've got nothing else going on in your life, I would love that sort of time in my life because I love this film. And then come back and listen to us. So, look, the thing with this film, first up, sorry, before I get into a tiny little synopsis, is it's a pretty grim future.
It is.
Now, the Americans interpreted that it was 2300 was roughly the date. Fritz and Co. Imagine calling your wife Fritz and Co. Fritz and his wife said later that they didn't actually have a time period. There was no actual specific date. But the Americans needed a date. And so in the different interpretations of Metropolis, this is just a futuristic society. The Americans were like, no, it's 2300. And then in a different version that came out, I think maybe in the 1980s, it was saying that it was 2026.
Whoa.
Which is only 5 years away from this podcast right now.
Man, if I can make myself a machine man and turn it into look like someone else and tell it to do stuff, that would be handy.
And also buildings that have 1,000 stories high.
1,000 stories. Well, let's see, 3 meters per level, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
We're talking about a 3 kilometer or so tall building.
That's massive.
We've managed to get to the hundreds of meters. There is, of course, currently an attempt on a kilometer high building.
Yeah,
which is going to be an exciting thing.
So
they're so tall they don't bother with fire escapes.
No.
Because if you're at the top floor, the time it would take you to get to the bottom floor, the building
You
will
could
have
learn
been
to fly.
engulfed. So they have what's known as safe rooms.
Yes.
Which are places to go so you don't panic before you die. Because let's face it, you go into these safe rooms and they're safe and they've got 2 hours worth of oxygen.
Oh, sounds good.
But if we're talking about a building encompassing fire here, you just basically got 2 hours to settle your nerves and make peace with the world, I think.
So they're just full of whiskey and
that's what I think. It should just be slowly pumping a bit of nitrous oxide in there. It's like
slowly wind
the
down.
people on top floors have access to the helipads.
Yeah,
and
they do, don't they?
They just fly away. But
it's surely at that sort of height that you could parachute or something.
Oh, absolutely. You could base jump from that.
You could bust them, surely. But anyway, it's a pretty grim future. It's one that is basically divided in the real kind of way of classes. So you have a real old school working class part of society who live literally underground. They're then responsible for making sure all the machines work and the electricity stays on, whilst at the same time the opposite is happening with the upper class because they're just kind of frolicking around
they have pleasure gardens
in the pleasure garden, and the people that run it are just kind of up in their high-rise apartments and office spaces and don't even really understand what's going on in that underground part.
They don't even once tune into the podcasts of the workers.
No, they do not. They're not interested in podcasts.
They just sit there with their highfalutin YouTube watching that.
That's right. And so that's basically the whole setup, which, as we all know, is the setup of many, many science fiction films and other types of films.
At least one of our previous classics.
Yep.
Demolition Man,
yeah, and many more. And then basically the son of the city's mastermind, who we get the impression that this dude was the one that kind of conjured up the whole city, maybe? It's not explained completely, but it seems like it's his baby, right? Like the way that the city and society runs.
He's listed as master of Metropolis.
Yeah, he is. He's the boss of it.
What that really means is unclear. He's also seems to be involved in the central bank in somehow.
Yeah, he's just in control of the whole thing. Anyway, the son falls in love with a working class prophet, who then we learn is kind of, she's what's the word? Sorry, she's
nice.
Really nice. She's good looking. She's looking after all the kids, and she's got a heart of gold in that she wants the underclass to believe that one day a mediator will come and save us all.
And unlike many a prophet that sort of goes straight to the doom, she's preaching patience and tolerance and there will come a time where we can talk with each other. The top and the bottom can talk.
The difference,
and I'm not sure what the outcome of that talk would be, except that I guess at least your children don't drown. Something along those lines, pretty handy.
Yeah, and prophet's a good word, but, look, for us it's been Easter. Maybe it's kind of a bit of a, son of God, daughter of God scenario here, isn't it? Like, preach in peace and happiness.
Well, there's definitely a lot of religious undertones or overtones in this.
Majorly. And, look, when we get into you can start looking at the details of this film, like it's 1927 Germany post-World War I, where they have been humiliated, divided, conquered by, the Western Front, so to speak. And, 10 years later almost, 10 years later, whenever this story is conceived. And it's a way of kind of talking about a society post-war, I think.
It's really interesting in that it is roughly
10 years. Yeah,
it's 10
close
years
to it.
after the Russian Revolution. So because there's distinct communist capitalist discussions
socialist
going on here,
kind of point of view,
and roughly 10 years before World War II, where as I understand it, World War II was that time where everyone came together and the heart mediated. And there was peace and joy. Is that the World War I'm thinking of? Or is it a different World War?
I think it is. I think it's heading that way, and we'll come back to that a little bit later.
The Empire Strikes Back, basically, is what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, we are. We're talking about that famous
World War
science fiction
II,
moment.
This is one where Han Solo gets frozen and Luke gets his hand chopped
Yeah.
off. This is not the good World War.
No, we talked about Spaceballs a couple of weeks ago. I mean, come on. We're clear on this. We're clear on this. So what was your number one takeaway from Metropolis, Surrey?
Well, unfortunately, this being a podcast, you won't see the little title card I'm holding up.
Ah,
But
I can
it's
kind
very-
of read
it's
it, but we're in separate destinations.
Right, undisclosed locations around the
That's
world.
right.
Yes. No, my number one takeaway from this is a somewhat more, I was going to say serious. It's not serious, but it's not silly. Is that I was watching this and I thought, wow, this is really paying tribute to Tim Burton's film style.
Yeah, it was.
Like this Fritz Lang fellow is just totally
He's
ripping off Tim
homaging.
Burton. I was watching that. It's going, that's Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
And this scene, in
The
fact,
scientist, the mad scientist.
with the light streaming through the window, and there's like the bars on there, and the mad scientist is framed. But I thought, well, that's Edward Scissorhands right there.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also there's the bit where they walk up to the door and bang on the door. I mean, that's Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
And so on. So clearly, I didn't realize Tim Burton had gotten so much of his film cues off. And it's probably not just this one movie. It would be this whole
It's film noir.
1920s era
German expressionism.
German expressionism, which I think I should probably watch more of because it was freaking fantastic. Mind you, and all the actors look like Johnny Depp with the kohl-rimmed eyes and
they wear a lot of eyeliner.
Yeah,
they do.
Just a lot of physical movement and expression. Yeah, very, very good.
Very Johnny Depp.
And the other thing I was looking at then, I went, wow, this is also, really just ripping off a bit of Blade Runner.
Yep.
The whole city layout, the flying. It just changed
That
the little
building,
biplanes
like the
to-
main building,
Yeah, well,
it's like
that's
a
it.
pyramid. Like it's kind of very similar to Blade Runner, right?
That's it. I mean, even has the machine mention that turns indistinguishable from a person.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I got this real revelation watching Metropolis. I watched it so long ago, like when I was literally a 10-year-old or something or other. I saw it by mistake. And so I kind of remembered that it's black and white and it's silent movie. And I remember like the image of the Maria robot and so forth. But I had no clue what was going on there. And certainly now watching it with this, the joy watching it, looking for all the goodness in it, I went, wow, I now know why so many people rank Metropolis as being one of the most influential science fiction films ever made, because it's produced the basic language from which everyone takes verbs.
Yep.
If that's sort of like if that analogy continues working
Totally.
there, or descriptors, it's people go, well, let's have a futuristic big hustling bustling New York type sort of a thing, and so you end up with the Fifth Element and Blade Runner and what's another one of these ones that are flying through, like the Star Wars movies, and you can keep listing them. I'm sure obviously on the spot I'm run out of ideas, but and then just this idea of robots indistinguishable from people causing trouble, where you get like the Terminator, for example, and we did Surrogates, for example, and it's just when you're watching this movie, you just keep an eye out for that. But the other thing I've got from this movie was the special effects. Again, this is one of the first films to feature like a serious take on science fiction. Yeah. Tackling serious issues. Because there have been previous science fiction, but they've kind of been a little bit silly. Yeah. This one's serious and made use of serious special effects, like that transformation of the robot, for example. There's rings floating up in it. There's 1927. And it's got these just beautifully, smoothly flowing animated rings, which looked as good or better than most stuff through the 70s and 80s. And
it even like when you and we'll come back to it a bit later, but even special effects, like did you notice like those landscapes of the city that then you had like marching people on a tiny little walking bridge. Then at the same time on another bridge you had like cars and a plane. There was moments that there was basically just drawings of a city, that were very basic. But then there was other moments, and you know what it reminded me a lot of in that way, watching it this time, that it's a little bit like, when we did do 2001 A Space Odyssey, that you saw Kubrick using, and his crew, not just Kubrick, but like kind of being extremely clever with the use of camera and props and settings, like that spiraling shot that suddenly makes people look like they're upside down. So it's very alien, it's very out of space. But he's just using perspective to achieve that, right? Like, he's just moving the set. But, like, you watch other films and they don't do that. You know what I mean? And there was the same here. Like, it's just the same old thing. It's like, here's a drawing of a big building, but instead of just having a drawing of a big building, it's also like, I'll get the marching guys and we'll just, shrink them. We'll project them and we'll shrink them. You know, like, it's really clever.
It was using this thing called the Schuften process, which is a process developed and largely produced in Metropolis. So it had sort of been played with a little bit, and it's based off a stage trick, Pepper's Ghost or whatever it's called, but it's modified for use with cameras. And it was then modified then up to being using mats, which was used in like Star Wars and so forth, but then also in blue screen. But this is the modified version of this was what Kubrick used. So Kubrick then sort of used the green screen with this process in order to dynamically place people in things. But this was back in 1927.
So like they could 50 years earlier.
They could stick people into these big scenes and sets with all sorts of stuff going around. This was most recently... it was used in Alfred Hitchcock. Blackmail, The 39 Steps, apparently. Most recently, Peter Jackson in Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. He used that for a couple of scenes for like Minas Tirith and so forth. So, again, cutting on... You sort of think 1927, 100 years ago. This is before World War II. So they didn't... I don't know, did they even have plastics? They had some real basic, preliminary sort of plastics and really... the sort of materials we're used to today, they just didn't have.
No. Those things are... You can, if you look closely, you can see that things are more artistically created. So it's like probably painted, or it's like cardboard, or it's wood that's been constructed. It's been constructed. Even those, the 7 Deadly Sin sculptures... what do you call them? The things that are like normally on churches and stuff. Like he goes to that moment where there's those... statues, but you can tell that they're not statues, they're people. But it's like, isn't that such a clever way? Because later in the film they're going to move, so instead of like making them statues and then they're going to be clay molds or something, like back in 92, like no, they'll just be people. You just go stand still.
They just be like.
But we'll use makeup, like they were really clever. Like we'll use makeup and costume to kind of pull it off.
Cheaper than getting a sculptor in.
So it's like, whereas these days it'd be like, oh no, we'll digitally do it on a computer.
And some of the use of perspective in this is just incredible. And moving camera as well. Because back in 1927, their cinema cameras were not readily movable.
No.
They were kind of... No. They were a bit delicate and you had to set them up. So there's some panning shots, you'll basically find almost no dolly shots and certainly no sweeping shots. But this had a couple of shots which really were because they pioneered using a swing. They put the camera on the swing, and that way it could go through these motions. They'd film it, and then they'd cut either end of it and just take the one bit they wanted where the camera sort of seems to zoom in or sweep past something. And, like there's a couple shots where it's just like the person's hand pointing from the camera. So it's actually the point of view of Dr. Rotwang. Rotwang, pointing at the guy's chest. And even those sort of perspective, uncommon these days. But it was a very effective piece. So that's my number one take on Metropolis is just 1927, Fritz Lang, mind-blowing developer of science fiction language.
Film language, film language,
And his... Considering that films hadn't been around that long in 1927, like in 1927 they've had in terms of real cinema, they've had 20 years.
Yeah, maximum. Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
films go back into the 1800s, but we're talking genuine sort of commercial cinema type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years or so at best.
You could see that he took some... Because it's something like about... I'm just trying to remember in my mind. It's something like 1880 is the Lumiere brothers, right? Like, they're the ones that started film. But in those first... once you start talking feature films, 1900, 1910, 1920... they were very... And you can see lots and lots of them, the silent era, like, they're kind of plays, but filmed, right? Like
films,
like
screen, stage plays.
It's almost just like they were... And even the actors in Metropolis, you can see that the actor is so used to acting for a stage. You know what I mean? Like the way they act, they use their body so differently than a modern-day actor. But... Yeah, so when you get to 1927 and then a film like this where you've got a director and also his crew going, oh, no, but we need to kind of like expand that. We need to use this language system. I mean, there is, and someone like myself that went to film school, this is a film that there's so much about it in terms of film language. It's not only science fiction, it's like film language. And you've just talked about some of them like perspective and stuff. Yeah, so I think that's really powerful stuff, and it's worth going to have a look at this film.
Oh, yeah, if you like your science fiction, you like your cinema, you got to watch this.
You do.
It's a long film, worth it. So, Mark, speaking of the film, is it a hope, a warning, or an experiment?
This is a total hope. I reckon this is completely hopeful. Even though man is horrible to other men in this film, and it takes someone to kind of like uprise... At the end of the day, the message of this film is like you have the upper class and you have the working class, and essentially they actually have to come together to make a successful society. And so to me, it's like, and the prophet Maria says, the head and the hand is fine, and they give the metaphor of the story of Babel that. The head came up with a great idea. The hand couldn't achieve it because they couldn't communicate with each other. And that's pretty much even Metropolis. It's the same story. It's saying that the workers, because the workers, as we see in the first sort of half of the film, are worked to death, right? For the upper class to just be frolicking around and having a good old gay time, Whereas, and so it's the same story, right? So it's like, whereas if you have, and at some point that we know that at some point, and we've seen so many other stories, you keep a population down or a people down, at some point they're going to burst up and destroy the masters.
Yeah, they won't be too happy.
No. And like we saw it in South Africa in terms of, like the race. I mean, eventually it does. It boils over, okay? Like people will never stay as the underclass forever. They might unfortunately suffer for 100 years or 200 years, but at some point humans will not put up with absolute bullshit.
Well,
and so we need to have the middle ground. And I mean, again, as someone that is only, a child of the 80s, etc., I don't understand World War I. I don't understand World War II. I can only understand it through text. You look at a story like this, again, from the German perspective, where they were like fighting World War I, and then they've been destroyed by the Americans and the British and, blah, 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 and sort of put in their box and divided up and, right, this is the way you're going to do business now. You could sort of understand maybe 10 years after that outcome, a generation growing up and being a little bit, maybe, feeling like they are this underclass to the rest of the world. And so you're exactly right that this story becomes a bit of an anthem to breed possibly Nazism ideology, right? And Joseph Goebbels, who became that major media maestro in Germany under Hitler, he was one of the side right-hand mans of Hitler, and realistically, that propaganda machine. This film itself, although it's brilliant in so many ways, can be seen as a bit of a starting point of that German propaganda machine towards that awful Nazi
point of view. Well, this is one of the reasons why there are so many versions of this. The original version, things got cut out, and one of the revisions that was done was removed what was considered communism sympathies.
Yep.
Before, and that's why you've gone from a 2.5-hour film down to a 90 or an 84-minute film.
Hey, that's censorship on its own, isn't it?
That makes almost no sense whatsoever.
No, it doesn't.
But it's
I do
cut
out the crap bits.
I like the message of hope here, where as 10 years earlier, the Russians had their revolution.
Yep.
Which my personal theory on that was that this was the exact thing that happened. That Russia at the time was quite poor, had a lot of basically illiterate peasants, and the ruling class of the Tsars were in a whole nother world as far as comfort and power and wealth were concerned, and they had no notion what was going on. And
was it the same in Germany at that time? I don't know.
And there was this big overthrow.
Yeah.
The working class just sort of were roused up by a bunch of philosophers and went, hey, let's get on with this. And I think afterwards they kind of probably thought, I'm not sure we're that much better off, really. But I think it had to happen. This story here, I like to think, and this is why I find it funny that they actually cut the communism out, because what the answer here is sort of saying, there's this like a communist revolution is happening. The workers are rising up to seize control of the power. But what the answer is, Fritz Lang puts forward, he says, no, you're going to have people butting heads. The poor people are rising up to overthrow the rich, and the rich are scheming these terrible schemes to destroy the poor.
Yeah.
You need compassion in the middle. You need someone sort of say, hey, let's all talk about what we want and really need and how we can work together and solve it. So I think that's that message of hope. How you want to interpret what being a mediator of the heart means, and this is always the problem, because invariably everyone on each side of history will say, I was doing this for the best of purposes and the reasons,
right?
It was to help my people, I helped my friends, I helped my family. It was, and unless everyone short of the real, like, genuine grade A psychopath serial killers will have these justifications where they believe they do that. Even there's plenty of psycho serial killers who also are deluded into thinking that they were, saving the world.
Yeah, that's right.
Or something along those lines.
I think hope for me, in the simplistic level, that at the end of the day, it takes the upper class and the lower class and a mediator, which is the son, the main character, to kind of like, it's a bit, when you break it down like this, I did it with my son tonight. I told him the story in 3 minutes because he came in when I was watching about half of it last night, and he was like, what the hell's going on here? Why is it black and white and there's no talking? Doesn't make any sense in his brain. And it doesn't make sense in my brain, really. But anyway, the point, I explained him the plot tonight in about 3 or 4 minutes, and the concept there is that, the film essentially is saying those different elements do have to come together. You need the rich and the powerful and the ideas. You need the brains. You need the brains. You need the people thinking outside the box. But then you also need the physical labor to make those things come, but you need a bridge between that. You need all three, and the metaphor is like the head, the heart, and the hand need to come together. So it makes a lot of sense. I do on top, just because we're talking about this kind of idea, that Fritz Lang, many moons later, came out and said he did not like the film. He detested the film, and he said that it was because it was his ex-wife. Because they became they separated, and it was her thesis, her idea. Wasn't his idea. It wasn't his.
One of the greatest science fiction films ever made was all her fault.
It's all her fault, right? But then, right? And part of that was because he said, because he fled Germany. Right, he's one of these filmmakers and this is what I want to say here. And you guys out there, if you're really keen on film, because I learned all about this at film school, he's one of these German filmmakers. There's a whole bunch of them that basically, because when he made Metropolis, Germany, and that's what we call germanexpressionism, there was an era there of about 10 or 15 years. It was the best cinema in the world, Germany. Right, they were just pumping out the best stuff. This is an example of it. it became some of the best stuff because Nazis, as the Nazis grew, they pumped so much money into it under that Goebbels guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, the odd thing is, a few of the artists, the filmmakers, you can imagine, you're a creative person, I'm a creative person, you're sitting there and you're going, the funds are here. They're funding us right now, and they're funding my stories. Hello, this is the best society in the world. And then a few years later, they start going, sorry, I want your story, but can you tweak it a little bit to approve communism? And you go, no.
Have a few more blonde people.
Yeah, have a few. And you're like thinking, yeah, okay, all right, it's worth it. It's the money. A couple of years later, yeah, but we just want to tweak it again, sorry. We just want to tweak it again. You go, no, okay, this is wrong now. Because I actually literally am looking at society and it's bullshit now, right? And your choice then is, if you stand up and you go, this society's bullshit, they're going to murder you. They're going to cull you down, whatever they're going to do to you. So artists in Germany during this era of the late 20s and then it goes into the 1930s, it took the Nazis 10 years of propaganda to get them to that point, to convince the everyday German person, 10 years of propaganda bullshit to go from, like this is our society to, let's just take the Jews out the back, and do whatever we do to them. Like an everyday person, it was 10 years of that crazy conundrum and propaganda that, the everyday person can't really be blamed for as good old-fashioned brainwashing. A lot of those artists during the 30s and once you get to like 39, 40 when the war broke out, they fled because they're like, this place is shit now, right? Like it's not working for me. And a lot of them, including Fritz Lang, they fled to the US. And basically what happened was that's when Hollywood, the real Hollywood, was born, right? And this is Fritz Lang is one of these guys that awesome German filmmaker, really good American filmmaker. Like, and he's one of them. There's a whole bunch. He's not alone. There's a whole bunch. And essentially, when you look at the time frame of Hollywood, that's when Hollywood took on a whole new path.
It's interesting. I'll point out here, there's also a similar, let's say, coincidence here. It could be cause and effect, could be correlation. Around the end of the 90s, around the end of the 90s, we're coming into the Matrix and around that period, action films in Hollywood, Mission Impossible and so on. They all started to take on a far more dynamic and exciting.
They did. And why is that?
Modern. Well, Hong Kong was being reverted back to the Chinese in 97.
Yeah.
And so all of these Hong Kong action directors...
Did they just see the path?
Who were like, so you're talking... So that's obviously Jackie Chan. And we've got, Sammo Hung and Lee and freaking the actress Michelle Yeoh, who has also done her own film work and so on. They all left because they all went, I'm not sure how we're going to be dealt with.
Hey, can we do Face Off? Is that a science fiction movie?
It is a bit science fiction.
It's a bit because he takes the face and puts it on someone else's face.
Yeah, that's experimental surgery, and that story could only happen with that scientific.
We have to do that.
But end of the 90s, we had the same thing with revolution or revitalization of action movies.
Look, it's happened time and time again. There's different cinema periods, but it's an interesting one. But I do want to say with Lang, he didn't like the film. He blamed his wife. Part of it was his ex-wife, sorry, I should say. And it was her novel. All right, so just put that into context. It was her novel they turned into a script. He said, you cannot take a social conscious picture in which you say that the intermediary between the hand and the brain is the heart. I mean, that's a fairy tale. Definitely. That's quote word for word. Sorry.
Fairy tale.
But he says he was very interested in machines. So that's how he was sold on the story idea. Anyway, I didn't like the picture, thought it was silly and stupid. Then when I saw the astronauts in real life, what else are they but part of the machine? So he changed his mind years later on the idea of his own film, which he didn't like, when he saw astronauts, and he thought, well, they are part of this machine. They are part of this society. And I thought that was such an amazing quote for us here in Spacebrains as well, because we're talking about science, we're talking about the love of science, talking about films that really get into it, and you think, wow, this is someone that's made a film that's kind of really revolutionized science fiction film, like you said earlier, and I totally agree. Like, how many other films have homaged this film? He didn't like it. And then years later, he's realized, well, hang on, the machine aspect is also, like, it's our society. It's the Matrix.
Yes.
So it's kind of like he's blowing his own
Yes,
fuse.
they're making us. It is entirely true, and this is something that we do need to remember and respect, is the fact that the only reason I'm able to sit and program computers is because prior to me, there's a leading from me going down to maybe the agricultural worker, there's a whole pyramid of support which is necessary functional society in order to get to the point where you have computers for programming.
That's right.
If you don't have people growing food and fixing tractors and building all the various tools and making use of the machinery and running the electricity and all the rest of it, you're not like, if all that went away, we've joked about it before, if there was an apocalypse, I'd be kind of left going, well, okay, I'll wait a couple hundred years for a new computer, shall I? Yeah.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? It's like it's him seeing the process of like the machine of science fiction and what that means in society, and then looking at it in reality. You're saying computer code and he's saying astronauts, and realizing that his comment of his film is also there. Yeah, I mean, the thing was he did flee Germany, whereas his ex-wife stayed, and she became part of that machine of Nazism. She joined that, which a lot of media... I mean, can you imagine... I mean, you can't even really... I mean, you just said the Hong Kong example, and we saw recently, like that last thing the Chinese did about a month ago, which was kind of basically making Hong Kong just completely under the rule, whatever it was.
Because when they took over Hong Kong, they had to...
It's a transition.
They had to sort of say...
transitioning, it's a long game.
We can't just chop everything off. And
they're doing it slowly, but that last thing that happened about a month ago, and there's a few people who outspoken, and I saw, I think she was the ex-Prime Minister, is that right? Prime Minister of Hong Kong, whatever, she spoke out about it. She's saying it's terrible. She needed the West... She was pleading, basically saying the West need to, put more pressure on China and blah, blah, blah. But she also mentioned that some of the real outspoken people have fled. And that's what it made me think of. Like, can you imagine this time of artists, filmmakers, photographers, cinematographers, anyone in the media industry, journalists, whatever, like going, you can either stay and you're basically pro-Nazi. And remember, there's that really famous photographer, and... Do you know her name? Anne Lepts or whatever?
No.
If you're out there, let me know her name. I've just blanked on it a little bit. But she's a famous photographer, world-renowned photographer, beautiful photographer. She stayed with the Nazis. And it's the same with his wife. She stayed with the Nazis. She made films for the Nazis. So can you imagine? Like, that's the thing. You're sitting there like what that scenario I said before. Like, sorry, we're funding your films. Great. And then 5 years later, we're funding your films, but we need more white people. We need more blonde. We need more blue-eyed.
We like to bring it more...
Yeah, okay, I can sort of do that. And then 5 years later...
It's more like Marvel approaches us and says, hey, I love Spacebrains. Do a Spacebrains episode,
But tell us that the Marvel movies are great.
Tell us about how much you love Marvel superhero movies. You're like, they're kind of not science fiction. No, pretend they are science fiction.
Right, we can do that. And then 5 years later, they're like, no, tell us that they are science fiction. Yes. You're like, no,
Well, they're kind of more fantasies or fairy tale. Like, they fit into that sort of, parable type story.
Tell us, or Hemsworth is going to tie you up and beat you to death. That's basically what it got to.
Tell us, and he'll do that? Ooh,
yeah.
Okay.
I know you're into that, but
But it'll be Liam Hemsworth.
That's right.
Oh, God, no!
No! No, it's not even Liam, isn't it? Isn't it that other Hemsworth?
Luke.
Luke.
It'll be Luke Hemsworth.
It'll be Luke Hemsworth, the guy that doesn't do anything.
He'll sell your house.
Oh, God.
And then he'll come around.
No, then he'll come around. So, can you imagine the media...
Luke. We loved you in Infinity.
Yeah, we did love him in Infinity. It's an interesting thing from Fritz Lang, this whole scenario, like it's a bizarre... I can't even imagine being a filmmaker leading up to that era of the 1930s in Germany, being such a prosperous media space, and then heading towards communism more and more every single day.
Not communism.
Nazism.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
They had a problem with communists.
They did have a problem. Yeah, it's the old-fashioned analogy, isn't it, of which good old science, putting the frog in cold water and just slowly warming it up. you know, and I think that's what happened here. Like, some people, like Lang, fled, but others didn't, including his ex-wife, who made a pretty cool film here, the one we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
And you can imagine, like, Goebbels came out and said, this is a great movie. He gets it. He understands it.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You worry, wouldn't
like,
you?
You and I are saying this is a good movie, and he said it was a good movie.
It'd be like if someone... can you imagine Alan Jones of Sky News came out and talked about how wonderful Spacebrains was?
Yeah, that's right.
And
you'd be like horrified.
What have we been doing wrong?
Yeah, what are we doing wrong here? I know. So anyway, I need to talk about it, Surrey, because I do love this movie. I do love Fritz Lang, and I do love that it's an interesting approach when you see the filmmaker talk about not liking their film and then kind of years later realizing it, but also this kind of, I don't know, I mean, this extreme moment in human history, right? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we like this film. I like this film. So many filmmakers acknowledge this film, and yet it is part of the propaganda machine, essentially.
Yeah, it got co-opted because it was filmed before the Nazi Party.
Oh, well and truly.
Well before then. But they weren't doing anything until 36-ish.
Yeah.
Leading into 30, obviously 39 was the big bang, but
yeah,
late 30s is when they started doing it. But they're picking this up and saying...
They're realising that this is the start that they can start playing off. So anyway, I need to talk about it because it is one of those things. And I know we're well beyond Nazism apart from a few freaks in our society. But, you know, and if you are a Nazi out there, come get me. I need to talk to you. We're going to sit down and we're going to watch Metropolis together.
We're going to mediate with a heart.
That's right. You come talk to me, your mother. And I'm going to explain to you why I think this film is good. And
not
in the same way that Goebbels thought
We'll go into powerful detail about how good this film is.
Oh, God. If we suddenly get some followers online that are Nazi followers at the same time, I'm going to be extremely upset. But anyway, are you up to any recent science fiction stuff, sorry, or your creative stuff?
I've got to tell you.
Tell us.
You know,
Please change the subject.
I've been talking about my short story that I've turned into become a novella, and now I'm
a Netflix series.
I'm writing a TV series, and the pilot episode. Turns out most of my world and story is Metropolis.
Oh God, it's a Nazi prose story again, isn't it? You've just accidentally stumbled upon. I've always wondered about the white power flags that you have up around this podcast studio.
No, they're all ancient Buddhist symbols for good luck.
Yeah, I thought they were Metropolis symbols. You know?
No,
I'm only joking.
But seriously, that there was this. I guess we were talking before we started recording. This goes to show the strength of the Metropolis.
Yeah,
movie language, the storytelling, and so forth. There's that. It's come through so many other movies and stories. It's become part of my base reference material when I'm thinking of imagery and stories. And I do like stories like this. This is one of my things. I like the person who changes from, you know, I like people who might be seen as bad actually not being that bad. I like that transformation in viewpoint, and this has got the religious stuff. And my stories has got similar sort of types of religion and this class structures and other bits and pieces. Yeah. So that's I'm not going to talk about working on stuff, but yeah, I was just watching this movie going, okay, so yeah, my story is tremendously derivative of Metropolis, which, having watched Metropolis, is probably not a bad thing, because, as I said, all of Tim Burton's work is derivative of Metropolis in a way.
Yeah.
Which is to say, you know, Metropolis must have obviously done very well.
Well, the thing is, for all creatives, we start at a point of, and I mean, this sounds maybe bad, but we do start at a point of copying. And then, because look at your children, look at my children do the same thing. The first thing they do is kind of copy and emulate. That is human. We copy, and there's such an emphasis, you know, like I'm in academia in my full-time job at the moment. Like, there's such an emphasis on plagiarism and shit, right? But realistically, we all start from a point of copying, and there's nothing wrong with that, really, because it's your reference point. And then you might go, oh, realize that copying what you're just saying right now. Oh, crap, my story is a lot like Metropolis. And then the question is when it becomes not plagiarism, you going, it's similar, and I don't mind homage in it, but how can I make it different? That's the bit that is interesting.
I do have to say, my story is far more fairy tale oriented in its themes and its approach.
Yeah.
But the similarities of this Metropolis city with, the people living up high in the clouds. And
1,000 stories. You did talk about that previously.
I wasn't thinking of this in terms of Metropolis. I was more thinking in terms of H.G. Wells' Time Machine, Eloy, Murlocs, except I was thinking, but what if the Eloy were actually just as industrious and so forth as the Murlocs, but, white collar, if you like.
And I mean, this is the interesting thing is, like, Lang said that they did look at H.G. Wells and they did look at Frankenstein. Like, these were kind of their inspirations. But then you can see how, especially something like Blade Runner has homaged this film, and Demolition Man has homaged this, and even The Matrix has homaged this man. I, Robot. And to me as well, like, yes, Edward Scissorhands, you can see Tim Burton has taken, like, the scientist in this film. Like, you could see a version of the scientist, and even the father was kind of a mold of those two. If that made sense.
Edward
Scissorhands, he's cutting up the hams.
Is the Machine Man.
Yeah, the Machine Man, right? Yeah, it's the same kind of... I only watched Edward Scissorhands a couple of weeks ago. No, a couple of months ago. I'm like, watching this, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, far out, Tim Burton and David Lynch as well as another filmmaker. Because David Lynch and Tim Burton, I mean, they do go hand in hand. I mean, come on. Come talk to me privately about that. Scissorhands and Lynchy Boy with Twin Peaks, they all kind of raise their head. They all go together, and we'll talk about them on Spacebrains at some point. But you could see all that direction. But yeah, like, I mean, Blade Runner, and I'm going to say it, like, Blade Runner is not one of my top science fiction films, even though a lot of people say that it's out there. But you look at Metropolis, and then watch Blade Runner, and you're like, the city, like, it's the same sort of city.
Same city. Again, machine people causing trouble.
Yeah. Class struggle, no one around. Like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So your story, Surrey, you're talking about, I can see some. So that's the thing. Are you copying? Is there just some homages or similarities?
I think it's just the case that, like, the Metropolis is in so many following stories and movies and so forth that I have consumed, that when I've distilled all the things that I like from those things down to a story, it starts looking again like Metropolis.
Yeah.
Because, Metropolis sort of, you can imagine Metropolis spreads out a diaspora of idea, which gets picked up by all of this films. And then I go and watch all those films and go, that's nice.
I like that.
And pull that together, and it looks like what got scattered in the first place, because you pick the nice bits, and it turns out a lot of what Metropolis, the themes and ideas and images used in it, are ones that I like, and they're the ones that I like from these other films. I like that Gothic. I like the reference to biblical terms and salvation and damnation, and these concepts of societies or people as mechanical or chemistry. In my exit plan books, I refer to the universe as being a complex chemical reaction that we're a part of. And that's how I sort of explain a bit of the magic in that you feel it with one bit and it has repercussions further on through this a machine-like fashion.
Yeah.
So, it's not too surprising now when I watch this movie that, that's a lot of the themes and ideas that I love are in Metropolis.
Of course.
I can't believe Lang stole all my ideas.
Copyright, very much.
When he was talking about H.G. Wells, he developed a time machine. He came out and he read my stuff. He went back.
That's right.
Okay, how about yourself? I saw you mentioned a horror film short.
Yeah, this is one that, I mean, again, you talk about homages. I mean, this is like a homage to Blair Witch Project. It's found footage. It's something that I just went and did as an experiment.
Last Easter's camping trip, isn't it?
It is. And it was basically just, I was totally on my own. I did it as a bit of an experiment to see what I could pull off if I was just totally on my own out in the bush or the forest here in Western Australia, and maybe what I could, even though I'm in this beautiful surrounding, could I come up with something that's a little bit horrific, which is where my brain goes to. And just as a filmmaker, like, what could I come up with on the spot? And it was a really fun, creative process. It sat on my digital hard drive for a little while, and just the last couple of weeks after I've got my next film progressing, so that like now I'm sort of in that pre-production where the crew is coming together. I just thought, so that's a totally different film, but I just thought, well, yeah, I'll sit down and start editing this. And yeah, I got a chance with this 4-day Easter break to spend, like a solid 5 hours on it. And it was funny because it was
You
kind
have
of
3 little kids, yeah?
Yeah, I do have 3 little kids, so I know they can sound... And they interrupted me about 1,800 times during those 5 hours, but I actually had 5 hours, like, I didn't have to think about work. Basically, my writing is at a point where it's paused, and, hey, I can just kind of play with this. And it was a very creative play experience, and I had a lot of fun, and I kind of liked the outcome, and then, yeah, when we get to a couple of days later, I did a bit of a refinement and ran it past my brains trust, my wife, who said, yeah, it's fun, it's funny, it's, there's a little bit of horror in it, and yeah, so I'm putting it out there. Why not?
Sounds good.
So yeah, I've just kind of like decided I'm just going to do this like 7 days of like promoting it publicly, and it will be available next Sunday. And it's called Stickman, and it's a found footage kind of concept, horror thriller idea.
Sounds pretty sweet to me.
And it's a total rip-off of Blair Witch.
straight
like,
up.
Just as I mean, like a found footage concept, like Blair Witch is 3 people go into the woods to follow a witch, and you just kind of have that found and all that survives is their footage. It's the same concept here, but it's a different creature. It's called a stickman, and yeah, that's what it is. A bit of fun.
Well, yeah, sounds great. I've been thinking about doing some computer animation stuff as well.
Yeah.
I've got just for spacebrains, a few ideas.
Yep.
We'll see.
Well, I mean, that's the thing as well, where I feel Metropolis, Surrey, watching it again, has kind of concreted into me a bit of a love and a definition of science fiction, which will help Spacebrains evolve for our next step as well. Coming up of Spacebrains, this festival, we revealed a little bit on our last episode, and we'll be revealing more. Hopefully, maybe almost by the time we get to the next episode, we might actually be launching something. But that's even another thing. But I feel like watching Metropolis and talking about what you just said before, like all of the key things that Metropolis talks about, the science and the philosophy and the religion side of it coming together, which is part of, and the Gothic side, is all part of Metropolis. Like, that's kind of the definition of science fiction, isn't it? This film is the definition of science fiction.
It does, because it's one of those ones where
all those things.
Yeah, it looks to some sort of an alternate vision of the way the world could be.
Yeah.
It puts a current kind of scenario, but reimagines it with this robot involved. Robot revenge plot, which if you took the robot out of it, you wouldn't have this story. It couldn't play out like this. You'd have to have some sort of a more, you couldn't. It would become farcical, where you'd be playing, some dude wearing a costume is pretending to be Maria, and then you have like some sort of a little mix-up switcheroo at the end, it just wouldn't make any sense if you didn't have, either clones or a robot or something.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, like, here you have that real underclass struggle, because it's very appropriate to 1927 Germany, and probably globally a little bit, a real class struggle, whereas in 2021, you take it like an Australian society, American society, the class struggle is probably not as strict as it is
not as
here.
obvious.
But that's why then you take something like The Matrix, which is why we consider The Matrix such a classic. Like, The Matrix is made out of that era of, you know, computers booming and the possibilities of computers, and then that understanding that we might have done something wrong with the coding and the computers are going to just fuck up, as in the Y2K bug. And that's kind of the birth of The Matrix. Like, how extreme can we take it? Because that's what this is, right? Like, it's the same thing, right? It's like you have this German society. Like, how extreme could you take that society? You take it to this point, this level, right? Where you have one class that's like frolicking around in the summertime and the other class that's like literally like, if they don't keep moving a machine, they're going to die, and that machine swallows them up. And they have to sacrifice, like, not just one or two of them, but thousands of them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such an extremity. And that's always a good definition of sci-fi, right? Like, and the same with Demolition Man. Like, you take, like this ultra-violent society. What's the antithesis of that? An ultra-peaceful society, you know?
Yeah. We'll take that to a ridiculous level where there's a little voice that finds you
even when you just swear,
wanting to use salt on your food. You go, no, salt has been deemed as bad for you, and everything that's bad is illegal.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, take it to that extreme. It's the same with have you read the Huxley book?
Brave New World.
Brave New World. The same with that, right? Like, you have the tribal world.
Before you get into it, no, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
I just know that's the most famous one, yes.
And 1984, like, you take these extremities of society, right? Like, the way society could be, and you take it to another one. That's all that always gets me excited about sci-fi, I think.
It is. It's pretty good.
So we should get into the details.
Let's get stuck in this. And
You've got some German names,
we should get straight through it. So it's directed by Frank Long, Fritz Lang.
Yeah.
It's credited, the writing credits of Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbou. And it stars Bridget Helm, Brigitte Helm as Maria. We've got Alfred Abel and Johann Freddersen as Freddersen. Yes, Gustav Fröhlich is Freddersen.
Is that just Fred? I mean, I'm like, it's Fred.
I found it funny that the son is called Freda and his dad is Freddersen.
Yeah.
So he's Freddersen. Okay. Rudolf Kleinroge.
I know Rudolf.
Yeah, Rudolf.
He's the inventor.
He's just got a little one, yeah.
Rolled one.
Erfinder C.A. Rotwang, the inventor.
I think. A offender.
Yeah, Erfinder. Yeah.
But I liked Fritz Rasp is the thin man, you know, the spy.
Oh, he was freaky.
Like, he was creepy.
Yeah, it's just... it's his facial expressions and that same look... You could almost sort of say that the Matrix, Mr. Smith, Agent Smith, kind of had that same sort of facial expressions and movements.
He was very robotic, that guy, right?
It's the number of Bond henchmen.
Yeah.
Have that same look. Like, you look at Jaws.
Yeah.
You know, the way Jaws sort of walks in. I don't know. It's just, anyway. So it goes on there. We've got Theodore Loos as Jehoshaphat.
Yeah, they're the main characters. So it was filmed in Germany, as we said, about 1926, something like that. Release was 27. Now, it had a budget. Now, online, they say it was a budget of 5.3 million Reichsmarks.
Reichsmarks, yeah.
Roughly, which today would be 38 million euro.
Yeah, so it's
right?
50...
That's a pretty big budget for a film.
Bucks.
But it kind of like it looks like it, right? Like, the sets look like it. So it doesn't surprise me that it had this huge budget. But I don't know if that's right or not. Like, I don't know.
I don't know what the conversion, 5.3 million Reichsmarks. It's sort of stated, every time I read that, it's stated as if that's a big amount.
Yeah, a big amount.
But I think when you're talking about, say, 38 million euros, let's call it 50 million Australian or 40-something million US, somewhere in that region, that's actually not a lot for a modern science fiction film.
No, it's not, but it's a lot. It feels like
but I think
it was a lot for that era.
In 27, the film cinema audience sizes, I mean, world population from 1927 to now has got to have doubled or tripled even.
More than that, tripled, I'd say.
Not to mention the size of the middle class who would be able to go
to actually
go and watch these things has multiplied enormously.
And they couldn't make money back then of like selling the movie to TV and stuff.
Or
So
Netflix.
it was, that's right. Like it was just whatever people paid at the cinemas. That's it.
Yeah, box office. That's
So the box office they claim is about 2 million US, is what the numbers I can see on IMDb. So, I mean, 5.3 Reichmarks to 2 million US. I'm not sure if that kind of made the money back at the time or not. Critically online, it does say that a lot of critics panned this film. Like it kind of took time to settle in.
Well, you could imagine it's quite different to a lot. It's also 2.5 hours long, the original release.
But Paramount in the US did run it. Like, so I don't know. They must have seen something in it, right?
Yeah,
like,
must have been worth something.
Yeah. I do want to say with Lang, we're going to get into the narrative. You know, obviously he's a German filmmaker, part of that German expressionism. I'm not going to go into details, but really what he was famous for before Metropolis was what you call that real German melodrama. And that was a niche that he was born into with these earlier films before Metropolis. What that means is lovely, dark, rich shadows, very creepy stuff for 1920s. We're not talking Human Centipede, Saw stuff, but we're talking 1920s melodrama. There's a great, I don't know the title off the top of my head right now. There's a great film that one of his films opens. It's about a pedophile. And so the child.
Okay, dark, creepy stuff.
This is what I'm saying. Like, this is what he was good at. The melodrama of the 1920s. This is what he's known for. Sorry. There's this great shot that a pedophile follows this child with a balloon and through a cityscape. And it's the start of the film, and then you just see the child kind of like goes off camera, and the shadow is of the balloon disappearing.
Oh dear!
So he's like kidnapped the child, right? Like, and it's like
Did
beautifully.
Stephen King watch this film?
Probably. A lot of people. Sorry, we're talking about Fritz Lang.
Yes.
He's a guy that a lot of people like, right? Like, so this was that's a German film of his. If you know the title, let me know. I can't remember it, but. This is the creepy stuff that he comes from. He's a very well thoughtful filmmaker. Also, his sets tend to be quite large. This was enormous, Metropolis. But he does build big sets, bigger than a lot of other people. And obviously part of that silent era. So we just want to I just wanted to give you a little context of where like the style of Lang's films were like before Metropolis. So we do start, and I think the opening of this film kind of outlines that. If you watch the first 2 or 3 minutes, you pretty much see. So you see Lang's style. You have these really awesome, interesting shots. They're all intercut of machines. There's big shadows. There's lots of pumping and thumping and twisting and turning of all these big machines, right? Sorry. And we also then have these like men marching, but really solemnly, really weirdly in time.
Oh, jeez. They
like,
look...
And there's kind of a check-in, check-out, right? Like there's a huge horde of men, like, I don't know, 100?
And
something like
if
that.
you notice, the ones who are marching out are a little bit more broken down.
They are.
Bent.
They're broken.
They're bent over a bit more. But they're all kind of have this posture of...
Yeah, like they're worn down.
As if they're all carrying something heavy.
Yes.
Even though they're not carrying anything.
Yeah. And that's a really good thing that Surrey's just said then. Everything at the start of this film is all about going down. It's all about being down and depressed. So the men exit the factory and you see them like going down these huge elevators to the bottom floor. In fact, at the start, the credits go down, like the text goes down. From the top of the screen down, which is very unusual because normally it's scrolling up. Like text in cinemas always goes up. So if you ever notice that the text coming down, scroll down, it's quite weird. It's a bit abstract, actually. Horror films have used it.
Because I watched a slightly different version of this to what you watched. When I watched it, said, the workers' city, the workers finish a shift, and that's text scroll down and says, and then they go down to the underground city, and that scroll down.
Yeah.
Is that the part you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was like an add-in.
No.
For the reversion version.
And that is the problem with this film, is there is so many different versions that you out there in podcast land might have watched a different version, but no, that is something that is very intentional. Like you see, there's a lot of that like downbeat, and like you said, they all seem like they're weighted down, right?
And they've got these big chunky ass shoes.
Chunky ass shoes, depressing clothes, shaved heads, and there's just so many of them, which was something that really impressed me. I've got to say that you see a lot of this now. Like, I mean, even you take Tim Burton, right? Tim Burton's Chocolate Factory. What do? He digitized all the little Oompa Loompas.
Yeah.
So it's just the one Oompa Loompa, and it's like times 100. Whereas here you've got like 100 different men.
Yes,
you know, it's so impressive like that. And I think it's also very much like soldiers, isn't it? It's like a marching militia, but of the underclass.
Yeah.
So we're basically in this big future. It's a huge city. It is a metropolis. We have buildings that go all the way up into the sky. We have a huge array of building shapes. Like I said, there's a bit of a pyramid. There's skyscrapers that are like built on top of skyscrapers. There's subways that are up in the sky. There's little old planes. I always love that. You know, don't you love that? Looking back at the old films when they futuristic and the planes are the old and stuff. You know, like yeah, they never thought to like modernize the plane.
No, it's just sort of still like the old World War One.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, World War One was the first time airplanes got out and about.
That's right. Like,
when did Wilbur Wright do their first flight? Was 1903?
Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
I seem to think like something.
You
like
need to look at that Peter Jackson documentary.
So it's like it's airplanes haven't been around for 20 years.
That's right.
To be fair, they are pretty modern.
They are.
The whole idea of seeing airplanes flying in between the cities, buildings would be like, whoa, that'd be like seeing space shuttles flipping about the place. You know,
I'm always forgiving of a lot of those things. Like it's the same here. You know, the father, like how he instead of having like a computer, right? He's got those buttons.
Yeah,
and it's like huge. But that was extremely futuristic. And he did at one point. Groot, the factory guy, he like does a video phone call with him.
Yeah,
right?
I was impressed by that.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Video phone, that was like 2001.
When you're talking about 1920s, like telephone's not that old, and he's doing a video telephone. You know,
yeah, that was really quite good.
That probably is coming from a filmmaker's brain. Like, oh yeah, we're just going to video each other.
Well, it makes a lot of sense there because we've talked about that movie I.O. where there was emails.
Yes,
and they didn't have the guy's voiceover. It was just it's like. You're going, well, it's a movie. You need to show something.
That's right. And
so, obviously Fritz is going, well, telephone calls are kind of a bit bland and we're in this science fiction environment. Let's spice it up.
So we have the upper class, we have as we described, the lower class marching down. We have then a cut to the upper class. We're told with one of those title cards that the upper class live in this sort of specific top of the skyscrapers, beautiful little garden kind of thing. And so we cut into this like world of, pompous and ceremony and a beautiful garden. There's women that are really beautiful looking, men in lovely tuxedos, and they're kind of like frolicking around the garden. And one of them says, "Who's going to be Fred?" I'm going to just call him Fred. Yeah. Who's going to be Fred's like entertainment today? Who's the lucky lady?
This of course shows the age of the 27.
Yeah, yeah. You know, women are a little bit more on there, but at the same time, you have these women, and they're really. I found the costumes really interesting. You know, didn't you? Like how the men were like wearing those puffy kind of horse pants, and then also like the women. Like these women like had these beautiful dresses, but you could see under their tops, so you could see their breasts.
Yes.
So you could see something going on, but it was also a bit hidden. It was interesting. And anyway, like one of the women is kind of chosen, and then Fred marches in. He does a bit of a dance, and they do like a sing and a dong and a dance, and they're in this garden together, and it kind of just, they're just having a great old time.
They're playing chasey or something.
They're playing a bit of chasey, a bit of hide and seek, whatever you want. But she wasn't wearing a top that you could see her breasts. It was kind of like a really silk, slick kind of dress. But then you could really see her legs, and I really thought, like this is 1927, like, mini skirts don't come about until like the 60s, but you can see a lot of leg there.
Well, this is back the old, the 1920s, the flappers.
The flappers, yeah.
And stuff, yeah. So I think
it was okay.
I think maybe Fritzy, he just sort of went, you know what, they're kind of the
extreme enough.
They're the risky ones. Yeah, they're wearing the hats. They got the short hair because a lot of these women also had the short hair.
Yeah,
they're wearing the partially see-through stuff, and they're all a bit, a bit crazy. So in the future, some future thing, this is kind of what high society is like, because it's sort of
why not?
a bit carefree. They don't have the same rules and structures because they're just so rich.
Yeah. So he's interrupted by the elevator doors kind of open, and this, beautiful young woman, Maria, comes out, and she's got, again, I mean, this is where I found this film very interesting. Like, she's got like 50 kids.
Yeah.
She doesn't just have like 5 kids. She has like 50 kids.
Yeah, in a modern film, you would have just had maybe 5 to 10.
Yeah, they never like
snotty-nosed
dress it.
brats.
Yeah, they never dress it this well, right?
This was well, he had like 500 kids as extras from the poor parts of Berlin. They were actual poor kids.
Yeah.
And so they were just
going cheap.
That would have been about 50 kids all clustered around this woman, and she walks in.
Give you 5 cents for coming on set for 18 hours. Yeah, we'll do it.
And old Freddie, he stops and clutches at his heart.
He
so
does.
dramatic.
Oh.
I really liked the melodramatic exact, because we didn't have sounds.
We didn't have dialogue.
And the music was all just that orchestral sort of stuff. You got, he sort of looked, and his facial expressions, and you sort of got used to it. I really
you got used to it very quickly.
Quite like this. It's a lot of breast clutching, like he's holding onto
Not
his heart.
sexual.
His heart, breast clutching in the Greco-Roman fashion.
Yeah, there's a lot of eyeliner. It's basically everyone is Johnny Depp with a lot of eyeliner and grabbing their hearts.
He's holding his heart, and he's looking, and he's like, you're going, okay.
He's pushing this beautiful woman away from him.
He has been. He's been, struck by something he's never seen before.
He's never seen this before, and that's what basically he asked. Like, he asked the waiters or the slaves, whatever you want to call them, and they're like, oh, they're the brothers, and they're your brothers and sisters, So it's like, oh, okay, well, what the hell does this mean? So we get a big shot of the grand scale of Metropolis. And we see the city, we see the trains, we see the marching men, we see all the skyscrapers. And he chases after, and this is what we're getting. We're getting his point of view. And he comes down onto the, into the factories, and he sees the workers, and he sees this epic scale, doesn't he? Of this, like, there's about 18 men working in sync.
A real piece of equipment there.
It is.
They built, and
puffing machines.
It's like a dance. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was just by Beyonce.
Yeah, it was. It could be.
That's very much the same thing.
All the single ladies, and they'd all be like dancing to that beat, right?
But that's what it sort of looks like. They're sort of moving. The people look like they're moving as parts of the machine, because they all lean over to one side and put their hands in a posture, and then move to the other side with their hands in a posture. And they're all synchronized in time.
But the whole point there is that they don't get to stop, right? Like they're just like that's their shift. They've got to like constantly. It's like this ridiculousness of them of keeping up with the machine.
Yeah,
it's not human.
Why don't you make a machine to do that?
That's right. Like, they've got to kind of like, and that's the whole point. Like then we start to hone in. He's watching, and like if they don't keep up, the warning level kind of starts like creeping up towards a warning level.
Oh man, so they made that warning level really obvious to us.
Yeah, it was electricity next to it.
I have a feeling that this is because nowadays we understand the concept of like the little thermometer or a pressure gauge or a little dial with a red section.
Yeah,
which it's still kind of funny that you even have a red section because. Wouldn't you have safety precautions well before you get to the red section? You shouldn't have a red section.
No, you should never be in the red section.
It should just have an off.
Yeah.
It gets to here, it just turns off.
That's what I thought watching this. Is like it had these like electricity bolts.
Yeah, they're really showing that this.
It's like if you get to this level, you're in trouble.
Because in 1927, you're a cinema goer. You're probably not used to seeing pressure gauges or any of this sort of industrial type stuff. So yeah, and there's some dude. He's fallen down and he's suffocating from the heat or something like that.
He's trying
to get the valve, and it doesn't, and it hits that mark, and there's a massive explosion and flames, and people go, I love this. People went flying off that thing, swinging through the air, crunching all about the place, and
there was bodies flying everywhere.
Fred does not take this well.
No,
he falls back, and he's like clutching at his heart again.
He's clutching his heart,
and his eyes are going wide, and it's like Seriously, if you haven't seen this film, you've got to see this film to know what we're talking about, because until you've watched this film and the way their faces express and emote and the makeup, it's just incredible.
So basically what he's watching then is like this machine exploding, but he starts to see that the machine is shaped like Donald Trump's face. And it just is wide open, the mouth opens up, and these poor workers like march up, and then they're just toppling over. And again, Surrey, it's not like 5 people. It's like not thousands. I was gonna say thousands, but it's like hundreds of men.
Yeah, there's ranks of
like
them.
walk up,
and it's all again, like it's a temple. He calls it the Temple of Moloch.
Yes, he does.
I didn't look that up, but I'm sure it would be more useful to people in their 20s to what the Temple of Moloch is. But it was just it was a temple thing.
The Temple of Murdoch.
With dudes with Murdoch, let's politicize this the fuck out of it.
Yeah,
but it's and you got dudes in like they're wearing what you might consider something like Indiana Jones Temple of Doom type temple guard.
It is.
They've got like a sash and bald heads and holding a spear or something, and they're chucking slaves in, and then
it's the same idea.
Once the slaves get thrown in, it's just the marching the workers up the columns, and they're just marching off the edge. The slaves have been thrown in.
Yep.
Unwillingly, but the working marchers just march off the edge into their doom.
Fall over, and they're swallowed whole by this big, Donald Trump kind of face. And then he kind of comes back to it, and the workers are kind of being stretchered off, and so he's extremely stressed by this, and so he runs to his father. And he tells him all about this, very clutching at the heartstrings again.
I love this bit because
the father is in this top of the high rise, and he's got like the stock markets coming down the wall behind him.
Yeah, he's got some ticker,
some sort of ticker and codes. And
I love this because when Fred comes in, and his father's points a few things. People writing stuff on paper, and he's given instruction. Fred comes in and he goes, Dad, and Joe, the senior, just sort of holds up a hand and silences his son as his son quietly closes the door. And then, Joe walks on and gives a few more bits of information and then signals that he's ready for his son. And you can imagine at this point, the son's that little spoiled little brat.
He is.
He's suddenly his eyes open to something. He's going, Dad, it's terrible down there. Oh my God, the workers, they're suffering. And
Dad, what are you doing to them?
Dad, oh my God. I know.
And his dad's like, don't you get a woman every day delivered to your door? This is how we pay for that.
Dad's kind of going, yes, that's I'm not sure what your problem is.
Yeah.
And
that's basically Dad.
He sort of looks at him, and instead of really responding to Fred, he turns to poor old Joseph and says, how come I'm hearing this explosion from my son and not from you?
That's right.
Which I think is really unfair because it had just happened and he ran straight there and said, because I haven't gone to check the news feed in the next 5 minutes. Yeah. But anyway, he goes, it has no excuse.
In the modern day movie, it could be like, who cares? And they all laugh.
Yeah.
Well, another death.
Workers die. Who cares?
That's right.
As long as the profits are there.
That's right. But you're exactly right. That's good sort of like touching on it. And the father tries to calm him. There's a very, did you also notice in this film that, and it's quite interesting compared to modern day, but like there's a couple of moments. There's a moment later in the film, like the father almost like embraces him.
They almost look like they're going to kiss a few times.
Yeah, it's like he holds him very. It's very romantic for a father to hold a son like this, but he kind of holds him from behind almost, and he kind of like, he's like, I didn't realize.
Well, when the son came running in, he clutched onto the back of him.
Yeah.
And I think this is that old...
It's the melodrama.
Vaudeville melodrama thing, because it happens throughout this where, Fred comes into his apartment to talk to Joseph and sort of grabs him, and they're up really close.
Very close.
Right in each other's faces, and they're really emoting.
Yeah.
And it's so passionate, and you're sort of like, are you guys going to get a room or something? Because
we're not used to this intimacy.
This is looking a little bit, intense for a conversation.
Yes.
But I really do think
it's just the era of the film,
it comes from playing off stage, because the guy who played Fred actually was a vaudeville stage actor, which is all about this, where you have to...
Yeah, that's it. They're playing to a stage.
You've got to show the intensity otherwise it's not going to be seen. Whereas,
Yeah, you'll notice that in this film, they don't really stare, not necessarily down a barrel of the camera, but there's no, like, a lot of it is like on a stage. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you and I are looking at each right now, the camera's over, you know, like a wide shot, even if it's close. Whereas now you get actors like they're just staring just off camera.
Yeah.
So we, the audience, are like, oh, wow, they're like staring at us almost, you know, like almost. And so it's very intimate that way. But back in this era, because they were so used to stage, it's that's why they were so up in each other's faces.
Yeah.
Like they're about to make love or something. Like to us, we're like, oh my God, what are you guys going to get a room here? What's going on? It's aren't you father and son? This is a little bit awkward right now. But it was just that sort of stage presence, I think.
Yes.
But anyway, the father tells him that the people who built this city are where they belong. And the son, Fred, says, but what if one day they rose up? And there's a bit of a pause on that. That's an interesting beat. And then this is where Groot, or Grot, the big foreman, comes in. Hey, what's going on? I'm the foreman of the heart machine, I am.
I'm also Scottish for some
I'm
reason.
Scottish in German for some reason. Oh, there's no voice. I could put on a Scottish accent if I like. But anyway, he comes in but he's very timid and respectful of the father because, you know, the father's obviously
Master of Metropolis.
Master of Metropolis. And he's here to tell him about the truth of what happened to the dead people. He also reveals that the maps, they're in their dead pockets, so he's found more maps, and so he gives them to the father.
Oh, dear. Poor old Joseph.
And this is another, like, the father... what about these maps? What's this about?
Why am I hearing it from Grot? And again, I was thinking...
Well, he's just telling you...
He had the maps taken from the... He didn't tell, like...
anyone.
There's no reason for me to expect that... I would have asked him, did you find any more maps? If I thought that there was a possibility that was even a thing.
I know. But he's not given a chance. This is the great thing about a silent movie. He's like, no, that's it. You're fired.
Yeah, you're
Joe,
out
you're
here,
done.
buddy.
And the thing is, then we get told from the son that, oh, do you know what it means to be fired by you, father? Yeah. Father's like, what? What does it bloody mean? It means I'm firing him. He's like, no, it means he goes down to the depths. He will no longer be up here with us and being nice and intimate with each other.
That'd be rough.
And so poor Joe is like stumbling
Joe
down the
should
staircase.
have saved his pennies, I must say, instead of frolicking in the pleasure gardens.
That's right. But he's like stumbling down the staircase, not looking too good. He looks like he's a bit of a drunk and pulls out a gun.
Everyone's got these tiny little pocket guns. he pulls out a pocket gun and starts to, he's going to off himself.
Yeah, and that's where Fred intervenes.
Fred says, no, wait.
I'll give you a job.
Yeah, you'll help me out. Go hang out at this apartment.
Yep.
And I'll come to you. And I guess Fred wants to go down and check out the machines a bit more.
He does. But then we have the father brings in this creepy Jaws-like...
the skinny man,
the thin man, and who's very robotic himself and very, poised in his facial expressions.
He looks just... I mean, they just picked someone that really did look like exactly the character he was playing.
Yeah.
Like, an enforcer, investigative enforcer, if you like. He wasn't a thug. He would have been the person who would order the thugs to pick you up, and then he'd be the one standing over you, looking at you. I said, more like the Agent Smith from the Matrix. He'd stand there looking over you, about to explain all the bad things that are going to happen. Yeah.
So Fred goes back to the factory. He comes across this worker with this... I mean, you can't... you kind of have to laugh. You kind of have to laugh at the machine he's doing. It's like he's trying to stop a clock.
Yeah, right? he's holding the clock arms.
But the clock's not
all
normal.
Lights that around, and two of them will light up, and he's got to point the clock arms at the lights.
But it's very forceful. Like, it obviously weighs... something.
Yeah, they're quite hard, and it's hot down there because they keep mopping their brow.
They keep mopping their brows, lots of smoke, and he says to him, "Let's trade places," and that guy's crazy not to accept that.
And he goes, okay,
but no, he goes, but someone's got to do the clock, right? Like the machine doesn't stop. He's like, I will do it. It's like,
someone will do the machine. Me.
Me.
Like, oh, it's so dramatic.
So he's worker 11811,
Georgie.
and they swap.
Hands him the bit of paper and says, "Here, just go up to my apartment."
Yeah. So he runs off. They change clothes. He runs off, and it's great because we get then Fred being this maniac, person with the clock thing.
Machine. Yeah.
But then we also get told that the worker 11811 doesn't go to Joe's apartment. He goes to party.
Well, he gets up there. He's initially in there, and he shows the ticket, with the apartment number, and he sits back, and he reaches into his pockets. He goes, "Oh, what's in here?" And there's like this
money.
big stack of money, and he goes, "Holy Mother of God!" You can see him just going, "What do I even do with this?"
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, what do I even do with this? There's some dude dispensing flyers about for Yoshiwara.
Yeah, Yoshiwara.
Which is like some sort of a nightclub place. Yeah. And he sees that, and he looks at the money, he sees it, and then, and then he just goes, "Okay." And then
to Yoshiwara!
He hands the brochure over to the driver, and the driver takes him off, and then we get it's like a montage, isn't it? But it's a collage of, drinking and gambling and dancing and kissing and,
Yeah, but why wouldn't he? He's just been a worker.
I know. Could you imagine that as that worker? Because their day is shuffle in slowly.
10 hours.
10 hours. And that's pretty, generous, really.
Yeah.
They only have to work 10 hours. 10 hours of this menial, ridiculous, hot job, which doesn't seem to have a purpose or a point, except that if you don't do it, you die. Which sounds like my job. Jeez.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like a job.
And then you're given more money than you'd see possibly in a lifetime. I don't know. Certainly a year's worth of wages.
We don't even know if they do even get paid, right? Like they might just do the job or die.
Yeah, more money than he could ever think of having.
Yeah.
And goes and he's dressed all fine. Yeah. He's got a driver, and he's just been told where a party is.
Yeah,
you've got to be thinking, what is this thing?
Go do it.
Because he would never have had anything like that. He rocks in there, and it's just like concierges handing him drinks, and he's going, okay. He's probably had some prison hooch equivalent.
Yeah,
and now he's getting the finest champagne, and there's beautiful people. I was going to say just beautiful women, but let's face it, they're all going to be beautiful because they're not stuck in menial jobs, and they've all got good health care and good nutrition. So they're all going to be looking great.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that would just be. You'd be mad. You would party yourself until you went, okay, I'm now at that point of the machine that the pressure's getting to the little danger point. Yeah. It's time for me to go back to that car, flash that other card, and see what this house is like. If that's what the party's like, what's this house like? Yeah, so off he trots, and who can blame him?
I don't blame him. Anyway, so then we're told also that in the middle of Metropolis, there is a strange house.
Centuries have left it alone or something. I think it says something along those lines.
Something along those lines. Then we have the inventor, Rotwang.
Rotwang. Means red wang.
Fredison, the master of Metropolis, rocks up, and apparently these two have been, close pals all the year. He helped him build Metropolis, and he says, "What do these maps kind of mean?"
Oh, hey, I think we have a difference here in versions.
Do we?
We have a divergence here.
A divergence.
So, in the version I watched the 2010 re-release.
Yeah.
Restored footage from the Argentina, Buenos Aires, or whatever it was. So we cut to this house, and there's a big curtain that Fredison's standing in front of, and he opens the curtain, and there's this bust of a beautiful woman and a plaque underneath it, which says "Hell." Basically, it was his wife and mother of Fred. And then Rotwang comes in and says, they sort of say, well, you got your son, but I missed out on the wife. I should have known. You were a man. She was a girl. Yeah. Is there anything more obvious? Sort of
well, it's pretty similar, sorry, in the version I saw. It's just the other way around. So we have the house, and then we have Fredison rock up who's saying, I have these maps. And then in that conversation, Rotwang says, you got the wife, and I built the city for you, and then she died with your son before I got to have the wife. I don't know, they've got a complex racial relationship, don't they?
Yeah.
It's there's the two men that obviously one's super smart, one's super powerful. They came up with Metropolis, and there was a woman involved, Hell, who happened to die giving birth to Fred.
Yeah.
But they both loved her. But it also sounded like there was maybe a bit of a deal that at some point she would swap over. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
the impression I got was that Rotwang was originally courting Hell.
Hell, yeah.
But then she met, Joe, and went, oh, yeah, Joe's kind of nice. And fair enough, Rotwang looks a bit creepy.
He does. He's a bit
and
crazy.
Joe looks quite distinguished.
Yes.
So I don't blame her, really.
Yep, she probably chose the better option.
Yeah, and he lost his hand, and he said it was a fair trade, wasn't it, to have a... he introduced him to the robot. And he's this robot.
But my impression of that was he lost the hand to get the robot.
Yes, creating the robot was a hand-worthy
But that was
job.
after Hell, right?
Yes, after Hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he says he's going to resurrect Hell with this robot.
So
And
he had the two hands for Hell.
yeah. So and it's interesting that hand is that gloved hand.
Yeah.
Not unlike Luke Skywalker's gloved robot hand. So anyway,
And he can control the robot, the machine man
Machine Man.
in the West. Machine man.
Yes, and so rocks out, and there's this robot. It's
Definitely not a man.
Such a cool costume. Stands up. That's Bridget Helm in there.
Yeah.
Apparently, she did not like it in there. That was a very uncomfortable costume, and she got bruises and cuts.
Yeah.
And she sort of wanders up and sort of has a bit
She
of a
does
look.
a good job. She looks like a robot. She
Looks
walks
like a robot. Yeah, walks, does the robot.
It's a cool costume.
And yeah, it's fantastic. And then, Rotwang says, well, give me 24 hours and she will be indistinguishable from a person. Which is, hello, not Razorblade. Blade Runner. Razorblade, Blade Runner, same difference.
Same idea.
Yeah, so anyway,
Fred receives a map while he's doing his clock thing. Because he's doing his clock thing and then this
he finds it in his pocket, yeah.
No, the co-worker comes up and gives it to him.
Not in one eye. Watching.
There you
He
go.
pulled a hanky out to mop his brow,
All right.
and that pulled the map out.
Oh,
and then
okay.
he picked the map up and he started looking at it while he's trying to do his thing. And a co-worker spots him with it.
All right.
And then the co-worker comes over, and
Oh, no, that is the same version. Yeah.
okay, and indicates yes, we're going to be meeting at 2:00 after your shift to hear her talk again.
Yes, she's summoning us. And I love that there's a moment there because he's like towards the end of the shift and he says something like, Father will tell us never end. I'm like, yeah, in that job it never would really.
Yeah.
I
I know that feeling.
Like,
There's some days there where I'm just staring at my computer going, it's been 4:15 for at least an hour. I swear to God.
we all have that feeling in our jobs, but I really do feel for him.
Oh.
Because he just do it. Because isn't there a moment there? I'm pretty sure it's here. Where there's the moment where it's almost like you see the other side of what he's doing, and it looks like the clock from the father's office.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, is he just like doing a job that doesn't even matter? Like that's kind of, I think, what it feels like a bit.
I think a lot of these guys are doing jobs that don't particularly matter.
Matter. Like you just said, haven't they invented that technology and they don't even need the human? Like.
Yeah, just have a machine to turn it to you can indicate the lights turning on.
Yeah.
So you've got to have the arms go to those lights. Why not just have all of those lights hooked up, and then just the ones that turn on get connected like a circuit?
Yeah.
Like what really is? And I think that's one of the points. It's kind of you look at any of these factory jobs, and if you have a factory job where you're on the factory line, I'm going to suggest here that you really keep your mind open to the idea of being more useful than just packaging something, because inevitably, and this goes for me as well, I've got to be more useful than just producing code, because sooner or later, someone will produce something that does your job for you.
Yeah.
Like, that the guy twisting those handles, sooner or later, and you see it, you see the person that puts the sheet metal in to be stamped into the car door and moves it on, and then the Tesla factory's just got like this robot arm that picks up the sheet metal and puts it in and stamps it. That's not going to happen today maybe or tomorrow, but sooner or later, anything that can be repeatedly done is going to be automated out.
Yep. So there's Surrey's public
that's a public
education.
public help, and
for today?
That goes for
A lot of jobs.
pretty much everyone,
Yes.
really. If you can, any part that can be just repeatedly done without particular training, it will be taken over. So make sure you focus on the other parts of your job which can't just be taken over.
So Fred goes down to these catacombs, and at the same time, his father and Rotwang also kind of follow the maps down. And there's a kind of it's an interesting bit, because it's very not like the factories. It's kind of more caves, catacombs, a bit religious.
Yeah,
styled.
this was the what did Rotwang say? It was like these are the catacombs from before the city that Metropolis got built on top of.
Yeah.
So there's a totally different style.
So Fred kind of follows the other cohort, and they do walk down to this, and it's kind of like they're coming down into a old church that's underneath the ground that's been broken down. And again, I had to think, is this a Germany that's been bombed? You know what I mean? Like it's been bombed and then the city is built on top of it. Like an old church that's been bombed the living daylights out and then built on top of, which we know is what happens. And so then at the same time, the father and Rotwang eavesdrop. They kind of come across there at a different level, up higher. Because again, it's like there's a building there that's been exploded. The bricks are all like broken and stuff.
It's like a bricked over section has had a few bricks missing.
Yeah, so they kind of like lean in.
And weren't the use of shadows in this really like the lighting? It's really good. I notice that all of these scenes are pretty static camera shots.
Yeah, they are,
and they've set them up specifically with because it's all black and white, of course. Then you can't have textures and tones of color and things.
No, it's all in the shadows.
So it's all in light and shadow, and all the actors hit their mark. Rotwang moves up to the gap and stands in. You get a streak of light across his face. His eyes are just a little bit in shadow, and it's just it's brilliant. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Anyway, this woman steps forward. Fred's kind of a bit, he's a bit unsurprising of everything, I suppose. He's a bit down from his 10-hour shift. He's regretting swapping, I reckon.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's going, oh, geez.
I think he's probably a little bit softer than he maybe thought he was.
Yeah. Anyway, and this woman starts talking from the what do you call it in a church?
Pulpit.
The pulpit, sort of idea. And starts preaching, and automatically kind of comes to a bit, and he takes her and he realizes. And there's these great shots here, camera shot wise, from Fred to Maria and back to Fred, and then and also the group shot and the men peering in. Like it's very, Maria is centralized. She's spotlighted. She's, it doesn't, even though we're not hearing exactly what she's saying, you can tell that then she's drawing all the men in. And I think it was really interesting that it's a woman. As you said, like at the start, the women are presented to Fred.
Yeah.
And you can see their breasts, and it's very, like you can say, oh, it's the 1920s, men and women and blah. You go to the 1980s, it's still like this. But then here, the key person is a woman. And she's actually the one in the power position, which is quite interesting. So,
it's also interesting at this point here, the factory workers are not looking on with interest in her as a woman.
They're not
interested totally in the message she has to bring.
Yeah.
And she's standing upright, and she's not moving a lot, and she's got her arms out, and she's very very giving, and there's a big contrast from later on when the robot takes over.
Yeah, and she's also dressed extremely modestly. That's the thing, and it's not like she's a voluptuous woman. It's not like she's dolled up. It's not about her looks. It's all about what she's talking about.
Because she's got a message that they're keen to hear.
Yeah, she does.
Their ears are...
Well, no, they're questioning at this point, right?
They're ear hard-ons for her message.
But this is the thing, they are also questioning, and she answers them about the fact, because there's a couple of guys that are like, isn't it time? I'm sick of my 10 hours in the factory. Damn it, can't we just rip some eyeballs out? And she's like, no, wait for the mediation. We need a bit of a middle ground. The mediator is coming. And they're like, no, when is it coming? And she's like, it's coming. Let me tell you a story of Babel.
Tell you about Babel.
And we get this like actual, you know, physical storytelling
within a movie type of thing.
a little movie within a movie. Where the edges of the film actually all go a bit faded and filtery. And we basically get told this story of these men that conjured up this great building in Babel, and then they called upon this, again, marching horde of workers.
Yeah.
Like never-ending.
With these great, huge blocks of stone. They wanted to build this tower up so it touched the sky and have a plaque on the top that said, great is the tower and great is man.
Yeah.
Or something, which it's a biblical story from Genesis where they build this Tower of Babel, and it's one of these stories from the Old Testament, and so you know God's a bit of a prick in the Old Testament.
He is.
I'm sorry for the Jewish people and the Christians out there, but you'd agree with me, I'm sure. Yeah. You don't go about the place just smiting people and flooding lands, because it's shortly after the flood. It's like he's flooded the land.
Yep.
And these guys, let's repopulate a bit, and they go, let's build this tower so high it touches heaven.
Yeah.
And then we'll go up there.
Yeah.
And God's like, yeah, you guys think you're a little bit too much of yourself. How about what I do instead is make you all speak different languages? Because at that time, they all spoke the same language.
Yeah.
Presumably because they're all just from Noah and his kids. That doesn't work very well, but it makes them all speak different languages.
The science doesn't make sense, but the religion does.
And they can't talk to each other and communicate.
Yeah.
And the tower collapses.
Yeah.
And the people it's such a tall tower. It's such a tall tower that when it falls, it sort of scatters across all the land, and so that's why there's all different languages.
Yeah. But in this story, it's simplified to the point of just the workers and the ideas guys couldn't communicate. We have that great shot where it's like the guy's at the top of the steps.
Yes.
And he's going, da-da-da, he's like explaining, and then but in the foreground, we have these like workers standing, listening, and then one of them like lifts up his arm and shakes it, and then another one lifts up his fist, and then they all just like run up the stairs to him.
Oh, they
just like rip him apart, right? Like this is Lang's version. They just kind of like run up, and you notice that? Did you notice this? Sorry, that even earlier in the film, and then in this moment where they're marching, there's a lot of triangular
they
marching,
do it.
right? And even in this moment where they run up the stairs to get this guy, it's like a triangular running of the men, where like one is getting there first, but then it's like compounded each time there's more men. And it happens later in the film as well when they kind of, in the climax, they come as a triangle.
Grot's coming up the stairs.
Yeah, like it's a funny thing, isn't it? I don't exactly know what that all means, but it's extremely symbolic of like the power of a horde or something. I don't know, yeah. It's interesting. But anyway, so coming back into the present, Maria is saying, well, this is the metaphor that we have to wait for the mediator, not meditator.
And we get the great movements of Fred there, where he brings his fist to
clutching
his chest. And
he's loving what Maria's talking.
This weird sort of like fists together on the chest. And he's like, oh, yes, I'm the mediator. I'm sure I am.
Yes, I'm the one.
And
I'm not.
Yeah, he's getting fully into it. He's
got the heart on for it.
He's got a heart. He's got a sympathy heart on. He's going.
Yeah. She's explaining.
His empathy flaps are soaking wet.
They are. They're ready. They're moist.
Oh God. Okay.
Maria,
I'm a child at heart.
I know. Maria has explained it, and the men accept it. They walk away. They all exit, and Fred and her are left. And he says that to her, doesn't he? He goes, "I'm the one. I'm wet. I'm ready. I'm ready for you, Maria. I'm the one. I'm the savior. I'm the in between person." And they kind of have a moment, don't they? And they kiss. And then he goes, "Yes, I'll meet you at the church, and we'll come back together later on this plan."
Yes, meet you at the cathedral. Let's go.
And then this is where we get, and I've got to say this, no one out there has seen another Fritz Lang movie. This is where you get Lang being the creepy shit that he is. You get this scene with Rotwang hunting Maria.
Oh yes, this is awesome.
This is Lang, right?
Yes.
This is what he's good at. And so it's the use of shadows, spotlighting,
Oh, that
very
light,
creepy
yeah.
symbolicness. Like that, Rotwang kind of comes up. She's like, "Oh, what's going on? And again, it's like Fred clutching his heart. She's like, "Oh, there's creepy
She
shit going
drapes
on."
herself about the place.
Yeah, she like drapes herself and she hangs back of the rocks. But then it gets kind of a bit more, modern day horror in that she's like up against a wall and, like he blows it, he gets rid of her candle and so it's pitch black.
I love the way that the torchlight is like looking around for her.
Yeah.
And then it lands on her feet and slowly creeps up.
yeah.
And then she realizes,
Yeah, like
I've been
I'm
caught.
trapped,
And
yeah.
we get a shot back then of Rotwang holding the torch and his eyes just above it. And
Yes.
he's looking creepy as
And
hell.
did you notice, like, when there's that shot, there's the two skulls beside him?
Oh, I didn't.
Because she's there in the
attention.
crypt,
Yeah.
and there's kind of we've seen earlier.
Yeah,
there's
there's
skeletons and
stuff
stuff,
around, yeah.
like right beside him, but behind him. So it's extremely, like a bit soft focused. And then also she runs, and there's Lang is revealing a bit of perspective here. Some of that special effects in a way that she kind of runs upstairs, and the torch follows her. So it's kind of again, it's like almost like makes the shot look so much wider than what it is. It's great stuff, all of that. And he's kind of luring her into a trap back into his little house that no one has questioned in Metropolis.
Yeah.
And then she's like stuck. She's
creepy
stuck
ass
in there.
house.
This creepy
With a
house.
trapdoor.
And he's like, haha. I've got you. Fred is then at this church, and this is the church I mentioned before with the statues, and there's the 7 deadly sins.
7 of the sins, yes.
There's a real moment of him kind of like taking in the 7 deadly sins. And I mean, those statues are creepy.
Yeah.
And you can tell they're not statues, they're people, but it's also creepy. Kind of, and in the middle, there's a Reaper.
Yeah, the Grim Reaper, Death himself.
Yeah, is in the middle with a big
And
sleigh.
he listens to the monk preaching about the whore of Babylon. No, riding the beast with the multi-headed beast with 7 heads and 7 crowns, and
She gets what she deserves.
and which is all hearts and minds. And that's sort of happening as I think this is all happening as Maria is transferred onto the robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's that wonderful special effects moment there, which and that scene where she's lying in that sort of transparent cover. You think of Passengers.
Yeah.
We did Passengers, like the medical bay thing that they lay on was just like that. And you go look at Star Trek, particularly Next Generation, and the more recent ones, Voyager and so forth. They have that exact same, bed with a transparent cover thing with
And the
bits on
Fifth
it.
Element, right? The
Fifth Element
where it
as well.
rebuilds the clone.
The clone things, yeah, and I mean, obviously, the Frankenstein, which came out just a few years after this, used the exact same setup with the lightning bolts and all the rest of it. It's
a great real scientist scene. That scene, isn't it? Because it's like, you've just explained the tomb sort of glass thing she's in, but it's also like as the Rotwang, like. He pulls levers and switches, and there's beakers bubbling, and there's smoke, and
he's working the timing.
He's working everything, like it's one thing after another.
It's not a programmed thing. He's got a.
It's the old-fashioned scientist,
It's
right?
the same even in the Matrix when you've got Mouse or Tank, sitting there. He's working the Matrix in there. He's clicking on things.
Or Doc in Back to the Future,
watching
right?
stuff, and like this. In reality, it would just be you sit there watching, going, "Oh yeah, my program seems to be working correctly." Yep. Yeah. There's nothing I can do.
No. Enter.
It's like, restart. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It reminded me of Doc from Back to the Future. It was a kind of similar, crazy scientist actually being a scientist. Sciencing. Yeah, he's doing science. Mad science.
I'm going to science the crap out of this.
And he does. And Maria transforms the robot, the machine, turns into her face, and Maria kind of like passes out in her little bed. Fred, meanwhile, has kind of come across, he was disappointed, he was depressed, but he came across the screams from the house, and so he runs in. He ends up in this trap himself with all these doors, and none of them have got handles, and he's just totally locked in them, right? Like he's trying to open each one furiously, but he can't. So he knows she's in there, and he gives up. He surrenders. Now Maria, she starts by becoming what every woman in power would think is the starting point: an erotic dancer.
Yeah.
Corrupt men.
Well, there's a little note given to Joe to say, hey, you can see Maria, she'll be, dancing. You'll see my robot, basically, will be dancing at the Yoshiwara or whatever. Yeah,
so just before that, Fred kind of happens... He gets released from that door prison thing. He can't find her. He says to Rotwang, where is she? He says, oh, I think she went to your father. So then he goes to the father and he just comes across. And it's funny, online they're like, oh, they were embracing. But in 1927, that meant they were just being intimate, as in they were standing next to each other. And he comes in and has a full like, oh my God, what's going on here? Yes. Sorry? What are you two up to?
Yes.
And he goes into like an actual medical fit.
He does. He gets flashing lights and he collapses.
And he's in hospital. Like he's hospitalized.
Yeah.
That's how much he was in love. It broke his heart that she was just standing next to the father.
Shocked and surprised.
Yeah. Anyway, and as you said, he wakes up to this note that she's off with an erotic dancer, as an erotic dancer. And we get this is a scene that Kubrick has kind of copied later in Eyes Wide Shut, I feel.
I thought you would say Apocalypse Now with Marlon Brando in the cave.
Well, it kind of is a bit, isn't it? But like we have this like, Maria's then like coming out and she's like, there's all these men holding up a cup that she kind of comes out of. But I loved these men. Didn't you love these rich men? How they were like,
the looks
they're like panting, and they're all like standing, like leaning on each other, and their eyeballs were bulging, and
they're grabbing
like
their faces, and
they're like licking, and like they were really like bopping to the music in a very creepy way.
And her dance was pretty out there.
Yeah, it was, because again, she's doing these weird dances. She's got her breasts exposed, and it was like these men had never seen a woman like her. And that's the point, isn't it? Because she's robotic and female. And so she's doing things that I guess no other dancer has ever done. And they were just like entranced. And we even get to a point where then it's a shot of just all their eyeballs.
Yes, it's just it's like
it's eyeballs
weird,
on eyeballs.
Kaleidoscope of eyeballs.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And this is all intercut with Fred hallucinating. He hallucinates that these men are kind of going crazy, but at the same time, like what Maria is dancing like,
death and the seven deadly sins are getting out.
Yeah, the seven sins come out, and the whole point. And we get this line of like, "Death descends upon the city."
Yeah, but it's great though because Joe Feddersen, he said, release Maria, release the Kraken, as it were. And that's why she's off to stir up trouble. And there's like guys having duels and punch ups, and it's not just people being excited by her dance. They're actually to the point where they're having brawls, and it's going just a little bit crazy.
It's total crazy, cray.
And then Fred does wake up though. Good old Fred. He wakes up, and he gets up and
returns to the catacombs.
I thought he went and saw Joseph, and
he does.
The skinny man, and
he does. And this is where they realise that it's the same woman. They sort of talk about that it's Maria, and that Fred says the only way to stop her is the mediator.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then he goes to the catacombs, and then this time we've got the false Maria urging the workers to rise up and destroy the machines. And the difference in her posture and stance and her movements are really quite remarkable. And again, did you notice, like, the men here now are like, again, the rich men, it's all about the partying and the excess and the debauchery, whereas these men, it's all about, rising. Earlier we were showing that they wanted to rise up, and Maria was like, no, wait, and they went for it. And then now it's like Maria's going, it's time to destroy them. And they kind of like get closer and closer to each other. And they're like putting arms on each other's shoulders, and they're leaning, like they're pulling closer and closer to it. Like, I don't know, it's such as a director, it's such a like minor thing, but it's so, I was watching it going, wow, like it's really, she's drawing them in, and he's really pulled that off in that scene.
Luckily, of course, he didn't have to write any script that made her speech incredible and moving.
No.
Because I often find this is a trouble with films where someone, okay,
well,
now this is the time you've got to do your big, rousing, they can take our lives, but they cannot take our freedom. Yeah, you've got to come up with some sort of big rousing speech that is like Martin Luther King style call to arms, whatever. It's
yeah, you didn't have to do that.
That's. I've always thought that would be one of the hardest things. You ask the scriptwriter, okay, now write a speech that will move 1,000 men to slaughter everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, no pressure. Can we just do that off camera?
That's right.
No.
And that's what he gets away with.
But here, of course, it's a silent. So she's doing all the movements. And like I said, you're seeing the reaction, the response, and you're going, yes, she must be saying something really rousing.
Yeah.
But didn't have to write it.
Anyway, Fred accuses her of not being the real Maria, and then ends up having this big fist fight with all the workers. They're like, no, she is the real Maria. What are you talking about?
She's saying exactly what we want to hear, so she must be real.
So but he really throws some punches here. And in fact, the old worker 11811 or whatever, as the workers fight Fred, one kind of pulls out a big knife, but he dives and gets stabbed, and they kind of collapse. And then Maria's like, death to the machines, and they all like stomp out to kill all the machines. So Fred and Joe kind of come to, and they've got the wounded worker, and they're like recollecting themselves. But all the workers are now like furious. They're all running, and they're running to the machines.
He was the only worker with blonde hair.
Yeah, he was.
So the other ones all had dark, which made it easy to identify him, which is good because all the other workers all look the same. But they patched him up and said, oh, so you were faithful after all, because obviously he'd gone off and had a bit of a party there.
Yeah, but anyway, they all run in, and this is where we get the hordes of craziness. There's a good 5 minutes here of like these,
many people.
hundreds and hundreds of workers like
Men and
running
women,
in, and they go back to those elevators and flood the elevators, and it's a flood of workers, and they kind of like, they're all fighting, and they're all scrambling. They break through that fence and they climb in, and it's a real chaotic. There's a good 5 or 10 minutes of film there where it's just total chaos.
And Grot has a little convo and says,
"Yeah,
hey,
they come in, but then they just rip.
They're coming in there and
punch up Grot, right? Like they just beat him up."
Fredison just says, "Let them in."
Yeah,
and he goes, but they break the machines, it'll flood everything. Yeah. Obviously, we don't want that. Just let them in. And you go, okay, and he opens it up and he looks really worried, and they'll come running. He tries to hold them off and say, what are you doing? It's going to be flood everything. And we don't care, bro. Yeah. And they go, they destroy this machine. Yeah. They don't care until someone finally, and a bit after this, reminds them, hey, where are all the kids?
Yeah. And so then we cut to the kids, and we have this great scene where the kids are in these apartment buildings, and just the water like purges up out of the ground, right?
It's all bubbling up. It's flowing.
It's bubbling
everywhere.
up. It starts flooding very rapidly. It's flushing out of buildings, because the whole thing is there where the workers live. It's underground, so the water's coming in from the rooftops, and it rises pretty quickly. But the real Maria, who has managed to, we're sort of skimming over it a little bit, but she escapes Rotwang. She comes back and saves the children, and Fred
but
and
all
Joe
the elevators are smashed.
Yeah, all the elevators are blowing up from all the chaos. The machines aren't working. So Fred rocks up, and they have a moment. They do have a moment. They're like, "Oh, Fred. Oh, Maria. Oh, Fred."
Yeah, there's
Maria.
Hundreds of kids all just
and there's
piling
100
around
kids,
them,
and the water's getting deeper and deeper. And so Joe says, "Okay, well, there's a way out. Like we can go up these set of stairs." And they all run to these stairs, and some of them hold the littler kids, and yeah, again, we have this like flooding of humans
Yeah,
with the flooding of water.
Packed, absolutely packed.
Yeah,
you could not fit another person
You
in
couldn't,
there.
and they all ran up these stairs, and I think one of the steps collapsed, and Fred and that jumped up, and then they had to like break through a fence.
Yeah, this gate is shut off the edge.
Joe and Fred kind of managed to kind of go around the building, and they break it. At the same time, we're getting like these wide shots of buildings collapsing in the flooding. And Grot, back with the workers, like, your children, you left your children to die. And they all like, they have that real like melodramatic clutching at the heart.
Yeah, well, they're all literally dancing around
like, and he stops them, right? Like he stops them from dancing, and and he does, and
and then of course they go, it's all Maria's fault.
Yeah, it's a good line there. It's just like, what idiot told you to do this? And that's what Grot says, and they're like, it was that witch, Maria.
I love this blaming, this offloading of responsibility. It's like, it was all her fault that we abandoned our children and destroyed the thing that was keeping it. I kind of feel we're a bit responsible. We made the choice at some point to do this.
No, sorry, it's Maria's fault. And they burn her at the stage.
She was a witch. Of course, she ensorcelled me.
Yeah.
She married me, turned me into a newt. I got better. You know. Yeah, so they go charging off, and upstairs, Maria, robot, is partying around, and the lights go out, and there's like, let's go up and watch the world go to the devil.
Yes.
And they go up, and they're just having a debaucherous, like, carnival type of thing out in the street with lanterns.
There's tits out, there's dicks out,
and
there's...
she's being held up on shoulders, and there's a funny little... what do you call it? Juxtaposition or transposition down in the catacombs. She was lifted up and she went out, arms outstretched like on a cross.
Yes.
And then when she's up here, she's on their shoulders and she's got her arms back and she's being spun around and woohoo and being silly buggers. And so that's one lot. Then there's the workers go hoarding through and up out onto the streets, and they're chasing Maria, the real Maria. Through the streets. Oh my gosh, no. And she goes running off. And I like the way he did this, because I was going, this is not going to turn out very well. But she then ran through the partying people and hit up on the church, the cathedral stairs. Yeah. And then all the workers, of course, crash into the party. Yeah. And they pick up the robot Maria, which is the actual one that they were supposed to be getting. Yeah. Which I thought, that was lucky there. And they go, we're going to burn her, and they just pile up a big sack of stuff and tie her up and start burning her. Like, holy moly!
There's no judicial system here.
That's just what's going to happen.
She's a witch. Burn her at the stairs.
You killed all my children, all our children. Like, we're not going to take responsibility for any of that. Like, we could have at any point said, let's bring the kids up with us, but we didn't.
No.
The real Maria then gets chased up into the cathedral
by
Rotwang, and then the Crow chases up after. No, well, that also happens in the movie The Crow.
Yeah, it does.
But they go up, and they Hunchback of Notre Dame or the Crow,
and he's trying to get her,
or Batman.
But Fred is watching Maria burn, and he's like, "No, it's Maria." And slowly, and all the crowd is cheering. I love this, like,
and they're holding him back, and they're laughing at him.
And Fred's like clutching the heartstrings, going, "You're burning Maria. She just saved your children." You know, they're like, "No," you know. And then she does turn into the robot, and I love that, because the second she is a robot, that crowd is like, "Oh shit, she is a witch."
Yeah, what?
They back away really quickly, don't they?
Oh, she's assumed a true form. There was
a gap, like they were all kind of like I remember there's a woman like dancing like right next to the fire when they thought it was just a human, apparently, as a witch. Yeah, when it turns into a robot, where it's like maybe she is a witch. It's like
holy,
like that whole crowd. Like, you would not get that at a modern day rock concert, being able to organize that many people, and they did. Like, even Groot or Grot or whatever is like, oh, sure, okay, maybe she was powerful. And then Fred's like, oh, okay. And then he looks up and he can see that Rotwang's at the top of the church.
It's also pretty cool when he says, but you saved your children. Your children are alive. And they'll go, hey, what?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're burning the wrong person.
Yeah, what have we done? But then
they're like, oh, no, Maria's up there.
There's actually a robot there. There's a real Maria up there.
Yeah. So it's a reveal. Anyway, so he runs up the stairs, and there's a real panic to it. I'm not sure if Rotwang was going to, like, chuck her off the church or whatever. But
it's a bit King Kongish, isn't it?
it is
Just
a
sort
bit
of
like suddenly
climbs up the stairs holding
Yeah.
it, and then he's up on that widow's walk thing at the top
Yeah,
there, and
yeah.
just kind of drops her onto it, and she
Yeah.
sort of fumbles
She's
and
hanging.
hangs on.
And
And there's
Fred
an
comes up and there's
epic
a one.
fist fight between
Yeah.
these two here. There's
And they slide down the
no
tiles.
Hong Kong style choreography involved in this. This was just
No, it's
wild
just-
flailing. This was great.
Yeah, and they fight to the edge of this broken church, and Rotwang then, he collapses and falls off to his death,
As I say, it's just the same scene for scene of The Crow.
It is, basically. And the father, Fred's father has also turned up, and he kind of watches, and he sort of, I think it's implied maybe he thinks his son falls to his death,
Yeah,
so
he's
he kind
upset.
of collapses and upset, and then... and even the crowd want to... It's a good moment. The crowd kind of start descending on the father, and then Groot... no, not Groot. The Thin Man. So he's just like, bang, bang, punches out a few of the crowd members as they get close to the father. And then it's like, the father runs into the church after Fred, and then, emerges, and that's where you get the crowd led by Grot. They come as a triangle. Again, this triangles, these...
Yeah, Grot goes up. And
You know,
isn't he cute the way Grot puts his hands
Yeah,
down
he's
his
like-
pants and kind of...
no, 'cause
gee, shucks.
But it's nice, isn't it? Because he puts his hand out first.
Yes.
And the father doesn't receive the handshake.
Well, the guy's name is Grot.
Yeah, but come on. Grot's going, come on, let's make it happen. There's a real good example of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. I reckon.
I know.
Really simple. Here's the worker. Hey, shake my hands. And the boss is like, I'm not going to touch your hands. It's like really. And then Fred goes, no, come on, let's come together, and sort of joins them.
This is where we get slapped in the face with the theme here of the heart and the head and the hands must be the heart mediator, whatever it is.
Yes.
And he literally goes and makes them,
drags them together.
connects their hands together, which is it's a nice little ending there, and it sort of finishes at that.
It does, the end. The
and
mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart.
What I like, one part I do like in this ending, the whole ending uprising sequence, they kept having that opening refrain of the French anthem.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
Which, because it's Revolution,
Yeah.
which was a few hundred years before that. Because it's funny they didn't have any Soviet music, which was more recent revolution and was actually a workers' revolt as well.
Interesting.
But he was clearly referencing the French Revolution, which was also which is probably more similar to what he was depicting. But I can't help but think, was he trying to divert from the connotation of communism? He's sort of going, because, the communist revolution very much in the forefront of everyone's mind at the time, I'm sure.
Yep.
But, not very popular in the rest of Europe, the old thing. In fact,
No.
one of the reasons we have universal education, public education, is because of the Russian Revolution.
Yeah, right.
Or to avoid a similar fate, because invariably in the UK you got this question of, the workers are all getting grotty and they're getting these communism ideas.
Yeah.
And the lords go, but if they had power, they don't know how to rule. This place would just turn into a shambles.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Yep.
And luckily, though, they had the idea of, well, how about we let them vote for stuff, but we give them all an education so they don't vote for really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Only moderately stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Because the big problem in Russia, you got Lenin and Marx doing their communism is great spiel, which of course doesn't stand up to basic scrutiny. But the people that they're talking to were literally largely illiterate.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a chance to read different opinions. They couldn't go and, let me just study the teachings of, this philosopher. What does Socrates have to say on this matter? No, these guys get living in the harsh Siberian countryside pushing plows because their horse died last year,
Yeah.
And they're suddenly told, we're going to rise up and take the means of production and we're going to rule and everyone will get their fair share of bread. What was the catchphrase was bread and water and sleep or something,
Yeah, yeah.
It was really simple stuff.
It was.
So, but the French Revolution was more so, was not so much that the workers were being exploited in that sense, but more the case that the peasants, who were quite capable of looking at, they looked after themselves pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just being utterly abused. Like the level of wealth difference, which didn't quite occur in Russia, but in French Revolution times, Marie Antoinette and so forth. They I did a tour through France a few years back, and you see these palaces.
Yeah.
And even by today's standards, they are
exorbitant. Yeah,
outrageous. Like the wildest dream of the most exorbitant, rapper from the United States would not have a crib that looked anything like, this. And then compare that to the peasants were literally in dirt and wood hovels.
Yeah.
Yeah, the disparity of wealth was just far beyond.
Well, I can't exactly speak because again, it's not research, but I feel that there might be a bit of a take of all of those different society aspects, and I even think that there is, again, without experiencing it, but the understanding of Germany being bombed, going to war with the rest of the world and losing, and what that meant for Germany. And here we are. You can imagine artists and filmmakers that were Germans, like being children during World War One, and then kind of coming through that. Can you imagine? Because we can't even imagine it really in Australia. Can you imagine like another country telling us what to do?
Yeah, to that extent of
and even like your tax, like we pay a tax that goes to America, and you'd be like, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like when you're the next generation, when you're growing up, like the men that went off and fought for that cause, that generation could be like, oh yeah, we lost, and I lost good men. But the children are like, well, I had nothing to do with that. What do I have to pay that for?
Yeah, well, why am I paying reparations exactly?
Why am I? That's just rich. Like, we're just paying towards the rich. Like, you know what I mean? So I can understand, and again, I don't know if that's the exact thinking, but you can understand that class struggle coming through, I think, in that upbringing of it,
Oh, for sure, for sure.
So what about our classic ladder? Now, for me, I've told online with Spacebrains that this is a bit of a favourite of mine, possibly my ultimate. After watching it this time, putting it in the latter perspective of maybe recommending an order of what people should be watching, I am denied about this because we did only do The Matrix recently, and I do think The Matrix is a real super favourite of mine. If I go back, we did 2001 many moons ago. I can't seem to eclipse it, and I've got to say this time round, putting it in that order, I would still prefer to recommend to someone to go out there and watch 2001 as a starting point, and then work down through my ladder. But this one does pip The Matrix now. And the reason being is a lot of the stuff we've talked about tonight that I think if you need to kind of watch this so that you get an understanding of all these other films that kind of homage it.
Yeah.
And so
it's an interesting way of looking, because I was thinking sort of almost the other way around. Like there's a couple of these films you've got to watch first so you can go back and actually appreciate. Because if you watched... Let's take the hypothetical that someone has never watched a science fiction film before.
Yeah. Or they're just new to the genre.
And then you say, okay,
bits and bobs.
If you're going to go watch Metropolis, it's like, okay, here's 2.5 hour silent black and white film.
Well,
and
I'm telling you, this is where you start.
And you'll be saying, you're trying to convince them, really pay attention, because a lot of I was thinking, okay, well, maybe watch something like The Matrix, an Alien. Alien's got a lot of the visuals as well.
Yeah.
And Fifth Element. Then go back and watch, say, Metropolis and A Space Odyssey, so that you can appreciate when you watch Metropolis, you go, like the way that these shots, that's used by, in The Matrix, he's holding up the red and the blue pill.
Yeah.
And that perspective where it's like just the hands and the reflections. I mean, that's what Fritz Lang has done here a couple of times in here where... Where Fred's searching for Maria in the house, and he sees the scarf under the door, and he reaches down, and it's the hand reaching,
so it's a hand shot,
and the camera moves with the hands, amazing stuff at 27.
Yeah.
But you go in The Matrix, you've got a couple of those shots where it is the hand or the glasses or the So maybe watch a couple of modern ones. This is where I can totally get where you're coming from, but I'm thinking if you watch a few of the modern ones, you go back and watch that one, and then go back and watch the rest of the modern ones.
I guess I'm just thinking about it. Give it the context first if you're new to the game. But it's funny now looking at my 11 classics. You could flip it and start with Akira, which is my number 11.
Yeah.
Where it's just kind of more entertainment sci-fi, good sci-fi. And then you start working your way. Oh, Predator, yeah, again, really fun. Science fiction, alien sort of action stuff. Demolition. Oh, okay, starting to touch on it, being a bit more theoretic. Because really, if I look at my list, and then Total Recall, like really it's almost like number 1 to 11, it is a little bit more thinking sci-fi down to more action adventure sci-fi. So it could work if you just flipped my ladder.
Yeah.
If you started at number 11 and went up to number 1, you're like going from kind of fun action adventures, but it is sci-fi, up to more serious sci-fi with more thinking involved. So that could be one way of looking at it, whereas then you could flip it upside down and go, no, I'm going to start with all the context.
Yeah,
and
so
work
I
my way
guess
down.
I guess it does depend on how science fiction-y you already are.
Yeah,
If you're reasonably au fait with the science fiction genre, and it's particularly if you haven't seen 2001 or Metropolis, you got to watch those two because, and just keeping in mind all the sci-fi you've already seen, and you watch those two and you go, holy moly, that's all of science fiction on a plate. There's very little that has come from since then, which does not incorporate elements of these movies.
And it does make me think you and I need to look at Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
Brazil,
I did see it many moons ago, but I guess watching Metropolis, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm thinking of that film.
Yeah,
but it's been a long time since I've seen it. Again, it was sort of back at film school. But so, what about yourself? Where is it on your little ladder?
Mine, it's right in the middle.
Okay.
So I've gone that idea of that you're going to move your way through.
Yep.
I start with 2001.
Yep.
And then you move down through like Alien and Back to the Future. So I'm sort of mixing up here a bit.
Yeah.
I like to a bit of a palate cleanser here and there.
Yes, you do.
And right in the middle, you hit the Metropolis.
You're putting the cheese in the middle.
And then you'll go...
Stop the wine drinking.
That'll be when you watch that one.
Yeah.
And then you get stuck into like Total Recall.
Yeah.
And you'll start... Yeah, that's sort of my mixtape, if you like.
And on that, what are you thinking about the science of this film? What are you delving into for Metropolis? It's an old film, like we talked about. Like it has video phones. There's robotics. There's sciencey. He's going to science the living shit out of you. What bit are you focused? We've got a Metropolis in the possible future that is huge.
There's a bunch of interesting stuff in here, and we've spoken a bit about robots and simulacrums of in the past, but I was particularly interested in the idea of underground living.
Right.
So there's this underground city, and there's been a number of cases put forward to say that a permanent moon base should be in underground caverns because it provides a certain amount of structure and protection straight up. And same on Mars, is sort of saying there's too much radiation and there's not much air and there's not much to see up on the surface of Mars anyway. So may as well go underground.
Yeah.
And certainly then you have underground living as it currently exists now. And we can go...
Mole people.
Yeah, will we be mole people? And we can go right back in time.
Yeah.
Right back a few thousand years ago.
Jeez. That is back.
Yeah, well, if you go back to... I didn't get the time. Cappadocia. In Turkey. Yeah, this year back in late 300s BC.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of...
2,500.
There's a bunch of, I think they're limestone cliffs that were tunneled out and lived, they've had hundreds of people in there for centuries, 1,000 years. Various people at various times have used these caves to live in there.
Yeah.
When you're looking more recently, we do have, say, here in Australia, we've got Coober Pedy, where people have used the mining into limestone.
Yeah.
To avoid the heat, because Coober Pedy is a hot-ass place in a hot-ass desert.
Yep.
And then more modern, you got Helsinki has got a very large underground part of a city.
Yes.
But there are future plans for Singapore, which is land starved, like it's just a city. It doesn't have a lot of space, and they've previously done like land reclamation where they basically carve off a bit of the ocean, buy a bunch of sand and fill it in.
Yep.
Bingo, you've got new land.
Yes.
But that's running out of space.
Yep.
So they're proposing a having a 3,000 square kilometer, 300 square kilometer. I don't know the. I've got the notes just here somewhere. If I were to, sometimes my notes are less organised than other times.
You got to remind yourself, where did I put the notes of the notes? Oh, I found them in the notes folder. No, but the notes, I don't know where the notes folder is.
Yeah, so I mean, the Singapore, Singapore's got a whole bunch of stuff there. So they've got their CityLink Mall, which is about 5,600 square meters of underground retail space that connects in with the City Hall station and Suntec City and a whole bunch of other things.
Yep.
You've got the Japan, and I've been in here myself there in Osaka. I remember I went there to go watch Iron Maiden, and we stopped to visit my friend there, and we went down to the subway, and he met us in the underground, thinking that we're going to go up above ground and go walk, like it's just like a tube station type thing. But we walked on from there, and it wasn't just a little connecting thing. It was through shops and through businesses, and we walked. I don't know how far, because it's really hard to tell when you're underground. Yeah. Before, we sort of went up a few flights of stairs and popped out on the street level.
Yeah.
And it was just this whole section underground.
Yep. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Once you start having like trains underground and tube stations and whatever, that then, sure, what's wrong with having retail underground?
Yeah,
and
well,
things?
They start connecting together.
Yeah.
And there are difficulties, though, with living underground.
Yep.
So
vitamin D.
Yes, there's some obvious ones and less obvious ones. I was going to say the less obvious one actually is the vitamin D, but
okay.
You've just blown that one wide
Sorry.
open. The obvious ones,
I know
of course,
the song. You know the song they used to play to us as kids?
No.
That ad, you know?
No, they only had it here in WA.
Sunshine.
Yeah, my wife, she has sung the
Vitamin D,
vitamin C, and all the rest of it.
We did have that. Propaganda.
Yeah, propaganda. In the ACT, we didn't have to get told to eat vitamins. I don't
know why we were told that you have to get in the sunshine in WA. We're literally surrounded by sunshine.
We try to avoid it more than anything else.
Yeah.
But so digging holes in the ground is hard work.
Yeah. And
it tends to collapse. And if you have earthquakes and things, or you get water, you've got to seal all of this stuff off, which is why places like Cappadocia, where they're digging into these established limestone or chalk cliffs, they're very stable. You've got the less obvious ones, which is, for example, sunlight. Humans require vitamin D. We can get it from food. There are some foods which will give it to us, but our primary source is a bit of natural sunlight.
Yep.
There's the seasonal affective disorder, which is what happens to people who live up in the Arctic Circle.
Right.
In winter, you just don't get as much sunlight and you get depression.
Yeah.
So it's seasonal affective disorder. So SAD is a thing. So living underground, you're going to end up with that issue.
Yes.
We can easily pretend with the sky and open spaces.
Yeah.
Again, in Japan, I was in a mall that was like the streets of Venice. So you're walking through there, and you could be forgiven thinking you're walking through the streets of Venice. Like the interior, it looks like there's 2 or 3 story high Venetian things. And it's actually the ceiling is just painted, it's domed, and it's painted in perspective and has particular lighting and clouds drawn up there. And it's a remarkably effective illusion.
Yeah.
It makes you feel it's like it was about lunchtime, so midday-ish, sun was up. My friend and I, we walked in, and it was immediately sort of heading into evening in Venice. It was a very weird mall to walk through.
Yeah.
But it certainly gave that illusion, and it'd be, the idea would be that you'd do the same thing if you had to live underground.
Yes.
Say on the moon, you'd want to have, you'd want to give people the feeling they're not locked in their own tomb.
That's right.
Because some concerns. And these are the same concerns that have putting people on the International Space Station.
They do, don't they?
So to get on there, you've got to go through psych evaluation. Basically, are you able to adapt to new experiences?
Yep.
Do you seek out these things? Do you self-moderate your thoughts and so forth?
Yes.
So I didn't go into too much because we are running long on this because this is such a fantastic film.
Yeah.
But underground living, we already do it. How far down can we go? Well, the further you go, the hotter it gets. So the first 400 or so meters is about 20 degrees centigrade. From 11 degrees down to about 20 degrees. It's pretty constant, and it's quite good. So you've got wine caves, cheese caves, and so forth.
Tasty.
Take advantage of that. But you get down, say, in the gold mines in South Africa. I can't remember the name of the gold mine.
Yeah.
It's in my notes here, but it's about 3 kilometers down, and the wall faces over about 60 degrees centigrade.
Right.
So it's like an oven. They have to continuously pump cooling air in all the time. So you start going down too far, and it starts getting hot. About 25 degrees centigrade every 1,000 meters or so. So you go down, a couple of kilometers, and it's just too hot to live.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far down in Metropolis they had dug, but of course this is what they're looking for in, say, a place like Mars. You want to get a bit under the ground there, a more stable temperature.
Yep.
Even if it's a stable but cold temperature, because Mars varies from 20 degrees centigrade to negative 123. It's too much. Yeah,
you can stabilize underground a bit
yeah,
more, right?
So the question is, though, would you be willing to live underground? Like, what would it take to make you accept underground living? I would say quite a lot based on the way people have dealt with isolation, lockdown. They tend to go a little bit stir crazy, and they're just living in their normal houses they live in every day.
I think it does depend on the environmental context, and obviously like cost, money, perspective on working life, relationship, those things you were talking about a little bit about, like how realistic underground could look, would play a big role.
Yes.
And then maybe also it's like, I mean, it's prison, isn't it? For the movie Fortress, isn't that 100 stories underground?
Yeah, that's an upside down.
That's upside down prison, but it's like, well, I was just thinking, I just had the thought of it, but let's say obviously being forced into that scenario, but I think also underground living would be fine if you had the option to go back up ground.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that always that freedom.
Because I think that's what it is with lockdown, is people probably spend, easily there'd be weeks where they do basically just stay at home, except for emergency.
But as soon as you say
shopping,
that you're forced to stay home, people go, what?
You have to. And you go, okay, that's no problem. I normally, day 2 is like, I just want to go out.
I just need to go outside, yeah.
I just want to go out.
The kids need to go out. They need to, like, yeah.
I got to do like a really big sneeze on someone on a public train.
I just need to get out there. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, but it is. I think so. It always that motivation factor, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but there is, of course, a lot of interest in underground dwelling.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's hard to find the space. Mexico City's sort of putting forward some ideas of earth scrapers. I said Helsinki already has a large thing. Quebec has the largest underground section with the Rezo, and that's 32 kilometers of tunnel.
I'm pretty sure
city blocks.
Saudi Arabia had a thing about this as well. Again, escaping the extreme heat, where they wanted to build one of those metropolis city. And again, it's kind of like half of it would be underground, like a dome underground.
From an environmental perspective, it's good because if you go look at it like Cooperpedy, a lot of these houses, the ones that are done properly, it's 23 to 25 degrees centigrade in there.
That's right,
year round.
Yeah.
It might be 30, 40 degrees above ground, but it's 25. It's like air conditioning, but you don't have to produce any air conditioning.
You're not electricity.
And so whilst you might need to pump a bit of fresh air through, there might be some air conditioning constraints, things to consider with engines and machines and things, but you could certainly save a lot by careful planning of your underground cities.
You definitely could. Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Well, that's an interesting take on Metropolis, is the underground, the working class underground. So that will do us for Metropolis. It's our classic, episode 55, Surrey. We move on. Next time we get together, we are going to Fast forward into the future, you were mentioning underground living on Mars.
We're going to science the shit out of this thing.
We are. We're going back to Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott, Alien, if you remember.
And we're going to look at a much more modern film called The Martian.
The Martian.
I'm Matt Damon.
Matt Damon!
I'm Matt Damon.
Yes.
You got to do that, Joe. If you don't know what we get, go watch 28 seasons of South Park.
South Park, yes.
But yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. I saw this film a few years ago, and yeah, I'm looking forward to going back and having another look. You've read the novel, which is interesting. You can bring that perspective. So hit us up. Let us know what you thought about Metropolis, what we talked about Metropolis. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course the interwebs. More information about where Spacebrains is going into the future in the coming episodes. Stay tuned. I will see you next time.